Chapter 21:30. Suyu's soul light flickered, like pieces of white snow surrounding his body. The colorful divine light of the six paths rules gradually faded, leaving only a pair of crimson eyes. The two colors of suppressed hatred and murderous intent lingered in the air. Why should I congratulate you? Even Suyu's voice had become hoarse, and it was filled with a gloominess that would make anyone shudder. The indestructible ancestral demon said, losing a woman in exchange for the awakening of your mortal body. Since ancient times, there have been countless mortal bodies, but only a few have awakened them. So what? Suyu interrupted him. Compared to her, what is the awakening of the mortal body? Can it be compared to her remembering my name? He had already answered with his self-destructing body, no, there is no banquet in the world without an end. Staying together until the end of time is just a pledge of undying love. When the music is over, people will part ways. This is the common sense of the heavenly law. Suyu looked up at the sky, his blood-red eyes filled with deep contempt. The heavenly law again. What is the heavenly law? You know better than me. That is just deceiving yourself, just an illusion to comfort yourself in life. There's never been a heavenly law, only those invisible supreme beings that rule over us. The indestructible ancestral demon was stunned for a while before he praised, as expected of the mortal body bred by the will of the people. Yes, the so-called heavenly law is the rules created by the stone-born sons of the holy mountain, the rules that rule us living beings. Your mortal body has awakened, and the rules that you have cultivated your entire life have broken free from their rules. His six paths rules had changed from the initial state of chains to the state of light spots, which was a sign of breaking free from the shackles of the heavenly law rules. So, if I want to bring back Cien Er's memory, I have to snatch it from the hands of the stone-born sons? Suyu's crimson eyes were rolling with thick, bloody light. Yes, as long as you can kill any of the stone-born sons and take away their sacred source, you can retrieve their stolen memories from the sacred source. Suyu's fluctuating eyes eased slightly. At least there was a way, although it was too far away, too long, and too difficult. However, Cien Er cried her heart out and asked him to remember that when they met again, he had to tell her his name and their story. Suyu felt that no matter how far or how long the journey was, it was no longer important. He owed Cien Er a lot. He had always neglected her, forgotten her in the corner of his heart, and let her bear so much alone. Until today, she had lost her most cherished memories for him. She shed tears and painfully forgot the past. If he could retrieve his memories, no matter how difficult it wouldn't be too much. Tell me, how do I get to the sacred mountain? The indestructible ancestral demon said with his hands behind his back, the end of the absolute beginning realm. Suyu nodded and left. He was about to head for the sacred mountain. He didn't want to wait a moment longer. With your current cultivation, heading to the sacred mountain will only result in death. Even someone as strong as the human ancestor, who held the mortal life cauldron and carried the will of all living beings, ended up dying. The human ancestor? Was that the remains of the human ancestor? Suyu looked at the skeleton. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt the skeleton move. After calming down, Suyu said in a low voice, Ancestor demon, please give me some pointers. The indestructible ancestral demon said, although you have awakened the sacred mortal body, your lamp has yet to awaken. It is still extinguished. Immediately, an ancient oil lamp appeared on Suyu's chest. This was the ancient lamp that appeared when he achieved the sacred mortal body. However, it had not been extinguished. Instead, it was burning with a flame that wasn't weak. It has not been extinguished. Don't look with your eyes, look with your rules, the indestructible ancestral demon said. Now, Suyu's rules no longer belong to the heavenly path. He enveloped the ancient lamp with the six path rules, but found that the ancient lamp was cold and silent, without any warmth. When he moved his laws away, it was visible to the naked eye that he was burning again. Do you understand now? The heavenly path has been deceiving you all along, preventing you from seeing the true appearance of your ancient lamp. Suyu's eyes flashed with a cold light. Suyu said, "What will happen after I light it?" The current ancient lamp's limited use to Suyu was to burn everything in the world and release the primordial energy. Use? The ancient lamp is the core of the growth of the sacred mortal body. Once it is lit, it is equivalent to opening up your own heavenly path. In other words, you will become the path master. Suyu's pupils shrank. How do I light it? Find a myriad lanterns ancestor Buddha. He is the myriad lanterns ancestor, and he can light all lamps that cannot be lit, including the ancient lamp. Where is he? The holy land of Western paradise. Suyu nodded deeply. The indestructible ancestral demon said, "As I said to purple-haired Suyu, only the stone-birth son of heaven can kill the sacred mortal body. However, what I didn't say is that only the sacred mortal body can kill the stone-birth son of heaven. Only by lighting the ancient lamp can you be considered a complete sacred mortal body and have the ability to harm them. Do you have any more pointers?" Suyu asked lightly. The indestructible ancestral demon said, "No matter how far away, I don't know. Or, even if I know, I won't have the chance to tell you, because I have already been discovered." Suyu's pupils shrank slightly, and he said in a low voice, "Didn't you say that you would take the person's most cherished item once by answering a question? Why didn't you take it from me?" "Because I paid the price for you. You asked 10 questions, and each of them, I paid the price of my clones hidden in time and space. The first 9 clones have been discovered by the heavenly path and have been destroyed. Now only I, the last clone, am left." Suyu was stunned. "Clones?" "Yes. The real indestructible ancestral demon died a long time ago in the destruction of the previous era. It was the skeleton of the human ancestor that protected my soul from being destroyed. Since this era, my soul has been divided into 10 parts, each hidden in a different time and space. The ones who answered your 10 questions just now were actually not the same soul. They were found by the heavenly path and erased after answering one of your questions. Now only I am left." Suyu was surprised. No wonder he always felt the smell of time and space around the indestructible ancestral demon. She was really hiding in the turbulence of time and space. Moreover, 9 of her clones have been destroyed. If you want to know how to go to the Saint of Western Bliss, you can find... Suddenly, the indestructible ancestral demon's body blurred and flickered continuously, like a shadow in the water. When the waves rose, the shadow overlapped. She had been discovered by the heavenly path and was being erased. You can find a multi-eyed boy. He will tell you the way ahead. Despite the danger of collapse, the indestructible ancestral demon still pointed out the way, but her figure became even more blurred. She laughed loudly. "I have waited for you for far too long, the successor of the ancient god Jiulong. I hope you don't disappoint us old fellows." Amidst the laughter, the indestructible ancestral demon was turned into ashes. It was as if an invisible but extremely powerful thing had descended and trampled on her. At the same time, the entire colorful world dimmed rapidly, and a suffocating darkness descended. In the darkness, there seemed to be a pair of cold eyes staring coldly at Suyu, wanting to swallow him up. At this moment, there was a creak. An untimely sound came from the silent darkness. Turning his head, he saw that it was the remains of the human ancestor. Slowly bending down, his right arm picked up the life cauldron that had fallen beside him. His eyes were cloudy, and there was no soul in his body. However, when the darkness approached, he moved on his own, his mouth uttering hollow and apathetic ravings. The human clan's 100 battles body is not dead yet. The primal chaos oath will not be returned. The heavenly book characters on his body shone brilliantly in all directions. Each of them formed a complicated spell imprinted on various parts of his body. Seeing this, the being in the darkness let out a shrill scream of fear. The human ancestor still has a trick up his sleeve. It will only be triggered when the stone embryo son of heaven approaches. Damn it, I've fallen for the indestructible ancestral demon's trap. As long as the primal chaos is not extinguished, I will not be dust. The human ancestor rubbed his hands together, and the life cauldron shook violently, turning into an incomparably huge cauldron. It suddenly turned upside down towards the evil being in the darkness. Ah! A shrill scream and a furious roar could be heard. Human ancestor, even if you die, you still want to become an enemy of the holy mountain. However, the human ancestor calmly extended a finger and pointed to the darkness. The life cauldron suddenly revolved, and the shrill voice gradually faded away. You destroyed my projection. All right, but I will not stop. The little saint body beside you will follow in your footsteps sooner or later. Ah! With a violent scream, the figure in the darkness completely disappeared. The human ancestor grabbed the air, and the life cauldron returned to his hand. He turned around and faced Su Yu, pouring out a ball of golden powder from the life cauldron. He did not understand what the human ancestor's remains meant, but the divine nine-dragon cauldron rushed out on its own, roaring excitedly as it caught all of the golden powder. What was shocking was that the seventh dragon, the reincarnation dragon, which could not be crystallized no matter what he did, was actually more than half crystallized. Su Yu's eyes flickered with understanding. He clenched his fist, and the six paths revolving small gate appeared in his palm. The gate of reincarnation. Create your own cycle of reincarnation and form your own world. From now on, your life and death will not be controlled by the heavenly law, Su Yu muttered softly. Under the cover of the gate of reincarnation, life and death would be in his hands. The dead could live, and the living could die. At that moment, the human ancestor's remains said intermittently, "Have you learned it?" Su Yu bowed deeply. "Thank you, human ancestor, for your teachings." The human ancestor had just been demonstrating to Su Yu how to operate the small cauldron. The life cauldron could trap the enemy and use that to destroy them. The divine nine-dragon cauldron could do the same. The human ancestor raised his head, looking at the end of the great void. "As long as my body exists, I will not perish in battle." He slowly lifted his leg, but his body had already disappeared. He was not even in the ecliptic palace civilization department. Only Su Yu was left alone. If he could, he hoped that everything that had just happened was just a dream. Looking around, Su Yu realized that his body had disappeared during the battle just now. Not only had it been destroyed, but it had also been swallowed by the void. His eyes flashed with deep regret. Only his soul was left. Did he have to start training all over again? Regrettably, he had sacrificed his body, which he had trained for dozens of years, but still could not make Qin Sienna remember his name. However, what he did not know was that, at the inter-civilization transportation portal of the demon realm, Qin Sienna lowered her head and muttered softly, "Siu, why would I remember such a name? Who is he? Have we met before?" Chapter 21:31. At that time, the stone demon half-ancestor and the two Tao lords had been waiting outside. They were shocked when they sensed the huge change in the center of the abyss. After a long silence, the stone demon half-ancestor said, "Let's go take a look." They tried to catch a savage beast and throw it in. The savage beast was still alive and was not killed by the mysterious ripple. "There's a situation," the stone demon half-ancestor said. They caught several savage beasts and used them to scout the way. They went all the way to the center of the abyss. The last thing that came into view was a flattened ruin. "Where's the human corpse?" The stone demon half-ancestor was shocked. The corpse had been there since the beginning of the demon world. Why did it suddenly disappear? However, the stone demon half-ancestor was more concerned about the indestructible ancestral demon. He looked around, but did not see the indestructible ancestral demon. What happened here? Why is there nothing here? The stone demon half-ancestor murmured. The two Tao lords beside him seemed to sense something and stared at the place where the indestructible ancestral demon had been. There was still a fragment of the indestructible ancestral demon there. The stone demon half-ancestor followed their gaze, and his expression changed slightly. He immediately took a step forward and picked up the fragment. He was shocked. The indestructible ancestral demon. Is it already? When the two Tao lords saw this, they quickly said, "Quickly leave that place." However, it was too late. The space-time there was instantly chaotic. The scene of the indestructible ancestral demon flashed past. The stone demon half-ancestor only had time to see the figure clearly. He did not even have time to say a word before mysterious power penetrated his body. That was the power of the heavenly Tao. The scene just now was the scene when the heavenly Tao chased after the indestructible ancestral demon. The moment the stone demon half-ancestor picked up the indestructible ancestral demon's fragment, it affected the space-time turbulence and replayed the final scene of the indestructible ancestral demon being killed. The power of the heavenly Tao passed through space-time and killed the stone demon half-ancestor who was standing at the edge of space-time. The stone demon half-ancestor's body was unharmed, but the soul in his body was instantly destroyed. His eyes were gray. It was just like the message the indestructible ancestral demon left him. The moment the stone demon half-ancestor saw him was the moment he died. If he was content, he could still live for another 100 years. However, he was not willing to work his entire life as an emperor and insisted on asking the indestructible ancestral demon. As expected, his fate was already decided. He was definitely going to die. The expressions of the two Tao lords changed drastically, and they tore through the air at the same time, not even daring to stay in the demon realm. Inform everyone to evacuate the demon realm immediately. The heavenly Tao has appeared here. Crash. The news was instantly sent to the members of the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce who had sufficient authority. One by one, the experts used all kinds of methods to quickly leave the demon realm. Close to 10 half-step Tao lords boarded a ship that drifted through the void. After asking around, they immediately left the Yao realm. Give up on chasing after Suyu for now. Everyone retreat. To them, the appearance of the heavenly Tao was like a ferocious tiger passing through, and they all retreated with pale expressions. However, outside the ancient dream Forbidden Land, a snow-white disk rapidly broke through the sky. It was a Tao artifact immortal embryo, a failed product of Meng Ku-er's attempt to complete her Tao. Its only function was to nourish the soul. Suyu had lost his body, and the only thing left of his soul was the soul board. The soul plate was indeed worthy of being a Tao artifact, immortal embryo. Not only did the soul not weaken, it continued to grow stronger. Presently, his soul was at the half-step Tao Lord realm, and he was just a step away from becoming a Tao Lord. However, the increase in the size of his soul was far from enough to become a Tao soul. It needed a qualitative improvement, and the so-called qualitative improvement was the appearance of the soul path fragments. However, Suyu was in no mood to temper his soul at the moment. What he wanted was to go to the Seven Knights' divine capital and meet Qin Xian'er one last time before the inter-civilization transportation portal. Even if she didn't recognize him anymore. As he was hurrying along, two figures approached the inter-civilization transportation portal. One had a big belly and was about to give birth, while the other was carefully taking care of it. They were none other than Huangfu Laiyang and his wife. Mo Xiaochai's belly was already very big, a sign that she was about to give birth. Looking at the Seven Knights' divine capital, Mo Xiaochai sighed deeply. To think that I would return one day. My wife, are you really confident that you can give her child a future? Huangfu Laiyang was full of worry. Mo Xiaochai had left the demon realm when she was still a child. Whether or not the current royal family still recognized Mo Xiaochai was uncertain. I know what I'm doing. Mo Xiaochai took a deep breath. The two of them arrived at the imperial palace, and a brand new building came into view. Who dares barge into the sacred place of the imperial palace? Several old half-path masters shouted in unison. They were responsible for protecting the royal family. During this great calamity, the Flood Dragon Demonic Emperor had disappeared, and they had no choice but to bow down to the stone demon half-ancestor. They regarded him as the new demon emperor. However, in their opinion, the Flood Dragon Demonic Emperor should still be the rightful successor. To their relief, the jade of life that they were in charge of had suddenly shattered just a moment ago. It was the life jade tablet of the stone demon half-ancestor. In other words, the stone demon half-ancestor was dead. They had not announced this matter, because once it was leaked, the demon realm, which had just regained its peace, would once again fall into chaos. However, this matter could not be kept a secret for long. Just as they were worrying about this, they suddenly sensed the bloodline aura of the royal family appearing near the imperial palace. They thought that it was the return of the Flood Dragon demonic emperor, but when they arrived, they realized that it was a human and a demon. They could not help but scold him, but they were secretly observing the demon. Mo Xiaochai's expression was calm. She turned her palm and took out a section of the dragon's horn. The words Princess Zai were engraved on it. Princess Zai. The half-step Dowlords looked at each other. They did not remember that there was a title like princess in the current imperial family. The princess was the descendant of the demon emperor's brother. In other words, she was the demon emperor's niece. However, there was only one demon emperor in the current imperial family, and he had no brothers. The half-step Dowlords seemed to have thought of something when they focused their gazes on the horn of a WYRM that emanated pure demon energy, and they said with surprise, "Could you be the previous demon emperor, Ho-E of the Chilean demon emperor?" Mo Xiaochai shook her head. "I don't know. I only remember that I once stayed here." The half-step Dowlords exchanged glances and nodded slowly after a while. Their eyes were filled with a sense of relief. It was like a pillow delivered to them when they were sleepy. The return of a princess with the royal family's bloodline was a timely help when the demon realm was about to face another calamity. "Come with me. I want to test the purity of the royal family's bloodline and the fetus in your body." Under the guidance of the half-step Dowlords, Mo Xiaochai and Huang Fulayang arrived at an altar in the depths of the imperial palace. They took the initiative to test Mo Xiaochai. Not long after, the three half-step Dowlords shook their heads regretfully. The purity of her bloodline is less than half. According to the ancestral rules, she cannot become the demon emperor. Chapter 21:32. The demon emperor bloodline that he was referring to was the bloodline of the first demon emperor. Even the most powerful Blood Lotus Dao demon only inherited less than 80% of the first-generation demon emperor's bloodline. 99%. Didn't that mean that he could reach the level of the indestructible ancestral demon? Impossible. Let's check again. Under normal circumstances, the bloodline would be weaker with each generation, so it was very unusual for there to be a reversal, unless the indestructible ancestral demon was reincarnated. But is it possible? However, the results of the test shocked them greatly. It was still 99%. The three half-step Dowlords were shocked for a long time before they gasped. What exactly is going on? After a long time, they gradually calmed down. Their eyes were filled with joy as they said, "Perhaps the strongest demon king of all time is about to descend." Although Mo Xiaochai wasn't qualified to become the demon emperor, her son, who was about to give birth, could. Huang Fulayang pointed at himself in disbelief. "My son is the strongest demon emperor." The three half-step Dowlords looked at him with disdain and said to Mo Xiaochai, "Demon Emperor Empress Dowager, this human is not worthy of your noble status. Do you need us to select a harem of 3,000 handsome men from the demon realm?" Hearing this, Huang Fuliang's face turned green. If that was the case, he might as well die. The demon emperor Empress Dowager, Mo Xiaochai looked at Huang Fulayang with a faint smile and said, "If one day this human doesn't treat me well, I will consider it." Huang Fulayang wiped his cold sweat and rubbed her shoulders with a smile. He sighed bitterly in his heart. Once upon a time, he wanted to be a man of indomitable spirit and create his own career. Now, he had become the strongest existence that relied on women. From ancient times until now, there were probably not many people like him, living off women and becoming the overlord of the demon realm, right? The grievance in his heart could be imagined. "All right, Demon Emperor Empress Dowager, please enter the palace to rest. We will immediately arrange for you to give birth." Mo Xiaochai rubbed her belly, and her eyes suddenly became gloomy. She then said, "Before this, I needed to use the imperial family's forbidden immortal tool to search for a person's remains." The three half-step Dowlords nodded. No problem. The three half-step Dowlords were led to the forbidden area in the depths of the Imperial Palace. During the battle between the Demon Emperor and the Dao Master, the shockwaves caused by the battle had destroyed the entire palace. However, the forbidden area of the Imperial Palace was protected by a formation that had been strengthened by generations of demon sovereigns, so it was safe and sound. They arrived at a gloomy palace. As soon as he entered, he could vaguely see the shadow of a fox flash past. What is it? The three half-step Dowlords were shocked, and they immediately rushed over. In front of a stone door that was emitting light, there was a foxtail that had fallen to the ground. It was unknown how long the tail had been there, but it was still intact. Someone used the sacred gate of samsara. The three half-step Dowlords immediately went on high alert. Mo Xiaochai slightly wrinkled her brows. I'll have to trouble the three of you to stand guard outside. Expel the unknown object immediately. The three half-step Dowlords nodded and immediately stood guard outside. When only the two of them were left in the room, Dai Xiaochai let out a faint sigh and said, "Husband, come here." Huang Fuliang's face dimmed. Fine. He raised his finger and sent a wisp of Su Yu's aura into the door. He then said, "Su Yu, this is the only thing that Xiaochai and I can do for you." When the sacred gate of samsara was opened, a powerful ripple immediately appeared and radiated toward the demon realm, as well as the boundless nothingness beyond it. In a certain faraway nothingness, the purple-haired Su Yu's body was lying in the ice-cold nothingness, drifting aimlessly along with it. The powerful nothingness was corroding everything on the surface of his body, but it couldn't corrode his body. This was because his body was condensed from rule fragments. Right at that moment, a weak ripple swept past and discovered his existence. A large amount of spatial ripples appeared around his body and swept him away. In the Demon Realm Palace, after searching for 3 whole days, the sacred gate of samsara suddenly opened with a creak, and a corpse fell out of it. It was Su Yu. The last bit of hope in Huang Fuliang and Mo Xiaochai's hearts was completely shattered. If they couldn't find Su Yu's corpse, it meant that he was still alive. However, they found Huang Fuliang's face was slightly pale, and his eyes gradually became moist. His old friend of many years had fallen in the end. The scene of him meeting Su Yu for the first time in the Sea of Constellations was still vivid in his mind, as if it had happened just yesterday. But he left just like that. A great sense of loneliness and desolation flooded his heart. Huang Fuliang trembled as he picked up Su Yu's corpse and cried bitterly. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Brother Su, rest in peace. He brought Su Yu's corpse to a side palace and prepared to hold a funeral so that he could give him a proper burial. Mo Xiaochai looked at the foxtail on the ground and took it with her. Not long after, a frail, beautiful woman dressed in a palace gown appeared behind the sacred gate of samsara. Her gentle eyes flashed with anger. Damn it, I spent years searching for the 9th tail, and you took it away. She was unwilling to accept this outcome. She hid again, waiting for an opportunity to snatch it back. Now, all that was left of her was an extremely weak soul. Even the weakest of living creatures could kill her. Therefore, she wouldn't dare to come out unless it was absolutely necessary. At the same time, at the Imperial City, at the inter-civilization transportation portal, Su Yu stared at the empty transportation portal and the lingering scent of Qin Sienna in the air. He couldn't erase the deep sorrow and self-mockery in his heart. Only when you lose something in the world will you know how to cherish it. Why didn't he understand such a principle in the past? After standing there for a long time, Su Yu was about to step into the transportation portal and immediately return to the demon dimension. Suddenly, his soul trembled slightly. His eyes involuntarily looked in the direction of the palace, and he was secretly surprised. That scent is in my body. His original body had a weak connection with his soul that couldn't be severed. Within a certain range, they could sense each other. How did my body appear here? Su Yu was surprised. He thought that it had been taken away by the heavenly law or destroyed in the great battle between the human ancestor and the heavenly law. His eyes flashed with surprise, and he immediately flashed toward the palace. He was now in a soul state and didn't have a physical body, so it was easier for him to sneak into the palace. Under the cover of the law of space, he quietly came to a side hall in the palace. What he saw was a corpse sealed in ice. It was his old body. It had been taken away by the sinful lady, and now it appeared in front of him in one piece. With a thought, Su Yu's soul immediately entered his body. Suddenly, his soul felt an unprecedented sense of peace, as if it had finally returned to its home after wandering for a long time. However, before Su Yu could begin to control his body, a strong, evil energy rushed over from afar and instantly entered his body. "Get lost. This is my body." It was the voice of the purple-haired Su Yu. He had never given up on his body, and when he sensed the fluctuations of his body, he immediately rushed over with great joy. Unexpectedly, Su Yu had also lost his body and returned to his body one step ahead of him. The purple-haired Su Yu was anxious, and regardless of the consequences, he entered his body and fought for control. Chapter 21:33. However, the purple-haired Su Yu had been relying on Su Yu's body all along. His soul was just a combination of many weak souls. How could it compete with Su Yu's soul? "I was worried that I couldn't find you." A crack appeared between the eyebrows of Su Yu's soul, and a powerful sucking force was produced. The purple-haired Su Yu roared, "Get lost. This is my body." As the indestructible ancestral demon had said, the most precious thing about the purple-haired Su Yu was his body. Without his body, he was useless. "You are wrong. This is my body." Su Yu swallowed it into his own vortex and said calmly, "Thank you for bringing my body to the great beginning realm from 1,000 miles away and returning it to its rightful owner." As he spoke, Su Yu closed his eyes and opened the soul vortex, completely destroying the purple-haired Su Yu's soul. His soul was full of resentment, hatred, and other negative emotions. There was no pure soul at all. Wait! Suddenly, Su Yu found that there was an unusually pure golden thread in his soul. After a moment of perception, he found that it was the soul of the sinful lady. It was precisely because of this trace of soul that the many different souls were able to fuse together and not collapse. After a careful perception, Su Yu found that he could feel the existence of the sinful lady through this soul. What was more amazing was that he could use this soul to absorb the cultivation of the sinful lady for his own use. He thought to himself that the purple-haired Su Yu was able to display the cultivation of a half-step pathmaster with the help of the sinful lady. If the purple-haired Su Yu can use her, why can't I? Su Yu's eyes flashed. He fused this wisp of soul into his own soul. All of a sudden, his soul was boiling. The soul fragments in his soul were increasing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Originally, less than 1/10 of Su Yu's soul was Tao. After merging with this wisp of golden soul, more than half of the soul completed deification. This was just a trace of the sinful lady's cultivation, but it had such incredible power. How powerful was the true strength of the sinful lady's soul? Moreover, Su Yu had a feeling that he could use this soul to steal part of the sinful lady's cultivation and push the cultivation of his body directly to the peak level of the Five-Crown Emperor. For him, this would be a great breakthrough in strength. However, Su Yu did not take any action. Instead, he closed his eyes and extracted 2 specks of light from his soul. One of them was the comprehension of the reincarnation Tao. The other was the comprehension of the Tao of creation. Among the 8 great profound meanings of heaven and earth, Su Yu had become the emperor of heaven and earth with 6 of them. He only lacked the last 2. He had already given up, but he didn't expect that his body would return. Moreover, he had yet to become a world emperor. Since that was the case, why not let him become a martial emperor with 2 Taos to make up for his regret? Over the years, although he had not comprehended 2 Taos with the Tao reign, with his current realm, even without the Tao reign, his comprehension ability was still far beyond what he had been in the past. Thus, these 2 comprehensions were enough to ignite the divine Tao and form the Gate of Emperors. Su Yu then tapped his body with a finger after he had imbued the 2 waves of comprehension into his body. Instantly, his body quivered and a giant stone door appeared above his head. The stone gate stretched across heaven and earth, attracting the attention of many demons. They were used to seeing someone break through to the martial emperor realm, but this was the first time they had seen such a huge martial emperor gate, so they all stared at it in astonishment. Somewhere, the flood dragon emperor looked up at the stone gate, his eyes full of surprise. Someone became a world emperor with the 8 supreme laws? His face showed deep surprise. There is someone in the demon realm with such a superb comprehension ability? What a surprise! The martial emperor gate appeared, and Suyu immediately borrowed a bit of cultivation from the soul of the sinful lady. His body was controlled by Suyu, and he suddenly got up and bombarded the martial emperor gate. With a loud bang, the martial emperor gate was immediately shattered. A law slowly descended and integrated into the head of the body. Then, a second stone gate appeared. The surprise on the face of the flood dragon emperor turned into horror. Double the 8 supreme laws to achieve the body of a martial emperor? Is this something that ordinary people can do? Even if it is a mortal body, only a few people can do this, right? There was a flash of surprise in his eyes, and he suddenly remembered the words of the indestructible ancestral demon. His heart moved. Was that the person he had been waiting for? After thinking for a while, he flashed to the sky above the palace. He lifted his 5 fingers and protected the entire palace to prevent anyone from disturbing the breakthrough. Soon, the second gate was easily smashed by Suyu's body. The last law was integrated into Suyu's body. The last 2 laws were finally completed, and Suyu's soul breathed a long sigh of relief. With a thought, he completely merged with his body. Suddenly, his body was surrounded by a myriad of colorful rays of light. It was amazing. That was the sign of the gathering of the 8 laws. Suyu sat up, and a deep understanding appeared in his mind. At this moment, he had mastered the 8 supreme laws between heaven and earth, and he instantly had the illusion of replacing the heavens. Beside him, there were scenes of birth, aging, sickness, and death, the withering of vegetation, and the reincarnation of all living things. It was as if Suyu's side was the endless universe, and all the laws were there. A world of its own. Suyu murmured softly. At this moment, he had jumped out of all the restrictions of the great beginning realm and rebuilt a world with his own laws. With him as the center, within 3 feet, it was another world that was different from the great beginning realm. And he was the universe master of the 3-foot world. Within this world, he was the supreme master. With a thought, he could bloom a flower. With a thought, he could destroy a mountain. With a thought of reincarnation, and with a thought of nothingness. As long as the enchantment was opened, within 3 feet, he was invincible. The only one who could compete with this world was the stone fetus son of heaven. They controlled the source of the great beginning realm and could break through the world and destroy Suyu's world. Quietly staring at the constantly changing scenes of the world, Suyu's eyes showed a touch of gentleness. This world, let's name it the fairy realm. It meant the world where Sienna existed. With a thought, the fairy realm converged and slowly dissipated. With a thought, the fairy realm could be released. From the 2 collapsed stone gates, there was still a white, misty, mysterious power, which made Suyu's cultivation rise slowly. Not long after, he reached the level of the middle stage of the single-crown king realm, and finally stopped. Then, it's time to collect some interest from the evil girl. Suyu's eyes flashed coldly, and he completely digested the golden soul. As it fused, an unprecedentedly violent energy erupted from it and rushed into Suyu's inner world. The inner world continued to explode rapidly, one after another, until there were dozens of violent explosions, and the inner world expanded dozens of times. Although there was endless pain, Suyu clenched his teeth and endured it silently. If he could improve his cultivation, all the pain would be worth it. Soon, the explosions in the inner world stopped, and the inner world was filled with an endless power of desolation. With a wave of his hand, a terrifying cultivation was unleashed. 5-crown king. Peak, Suyu said to himself. It was not much different from what he had expected. He had snatched such a cultivation from the hands of the evil girl. In the faraway sea of constellations, an ancient formation that had been sealed suddenly shone brightly. On the other side of the formation, the evil girl sat cross-legged, trying her best to break through the formation and break out of the prison. All of a sudden, the evil girl gave a muffled groan, and there was a faint trace of pain. "My soul has been destroyed." The epic-making dragon lay at her feet and said calmly, "As expected, the human brat was born with luck, and he cannot be killed just because he was strong." Without a doubt, the purple-haired Suyu had failed, and his soul had been destroyed. The light on the surface of the evil girl's body flickered, and she slowly calmed down. She said, "That evil thing is dead. It saves me the trouble of doing it myself." The epic-making dragon's eyes flashed, and his face was filled with deep joy. The formation is about to be broken through. It has been broken through. The evil girl stood up slowly and pressed her palm on the formation. Suddenly, the formation shone brightly, and a whiff of the great beginning realm's aura came from it. The evil girl looked up at the existence in the darkness and said calmly, "Tao Tai, we will never meet again. Hee, I feel that we will meet again one day." The weak voice of the Tao Tai came from nowhere. It seemed that in the battle between him and the evil girl had won. "It's best not to meet again. Otherwise, you will die," the evil girl said calmly, and jumped into the formation. The epic-making dragon also jumped in excitedly, and finally disappeared without a trace. After a long time, the Tao Tai sighed. "As expected of the number one person under the Emperor, you can defeat me with only 10% of your strength. Even if you recover a little, I might be turned into ashes. That human boy who escaped, you're on your own now." Swish, in the sea of constellations. All the seawater of the sword pavilion suddenly evaporated into thin air, revealing the dry seabed. A giant white dragon roared and flew up to the sky. On the dragon's head, a woman stood with her hands behind her back. Her whole body was shining, and her face could not be seen clearly, but her voice was clear and sweet. She closed her eyes and sensed for a moment, then opened them and pointed to the west. "Demon Realm, let's go." The epic-making dragon let out a long roar and flew away through the clouds. In the palace of the Demon Realm, Suyu suddenly felt a strong sense of discomfort, as if he was being stared at by something, which made him feel cold all over. "Evil girl, you finally came out?" Suyu's eyes were cold, and he was not afraid. This day would come sooner or later. He was even glad that the evil girl had only managed to escape today. If it had been a little earlier, he would probably have died. But now there was still hope. As long as he became a pathmaster, he could compete with her. A sense of urgency surged into Suyu's heart. He had to find the dazzling boy as soon as possible and ask him about the location of the Western Holy Land of Bliss. After thinking for a while, Suyu suddenly looked up at the sky and said calmly, "You can come down now." Crash, the flood dragon demonic emperor, or to be exact, the Empyrean fairy, appeared in front of Suyu. Staring at Suyu's face, she was slightly surprised. "It's you?" Just now, he had tried to find out who was in the colorful light, but he was blocked by an indescribably powerful barrier. It felt like there was a world blocking his sight. Only now did he recognize the person in the light. It was Suyu, whom he had tried to kill before. Chapter 2134. The indestructible ancestral demon once said, "When a man with 9 colors of light comes, he will show me the safe way to survive this catastrophe." Therefore, the demon emperor had been waiting here. He never expected that the person he was waiting for was Suyu. However, when he saw that Suyu's slightly reddened eyes were filled with coldness, he knew that it was impossible for them to reconcile. He wanted to interrogate Suyu, but he remembered the last words of the indestructible ancestral demon. Don't force things. So far, every word of the indestructible ancestral demon had come true. But if he didn't force things, what should he do? "What can I do for you?" Suyu said lightly. Seeing that he was guarding him, Suyu did not attack immediately. "Huh?" The Flood Dragon Emperor was slightly surprised. It seemed that Suyu did not have a deep hatred for him. Perhaps the relationship between them could be resolved. The Flood Dragon Emperor lowered his posture and said, I was instructed by the indestructible ancestral demon to wait for you here. Suyu looked at him lightly, but he saw through his thoughts at a glance. You want to ask me how to avoid the catastrophe of the end of the world in 100 years, right? His soul power was unprecedentedly strong, and he was already at the level of a half-step path master. It was easy to pry into a person's mind. Even if the other party was at the level of a path master, he would not be able to stop him if he was not on guard. The Flood Dragon Emperor was shocked. He looked at Suyu in surprise, and then immediately blocked his thoughts so that Suyu could not pry. Sorry, I don't know how to avoid the catastrophe. The indestructible ancestral demon's words may not be entirely correct. He really did not know where the so-called road ahead was. The Flood Dragon Emperor did not think so. The indestructible ancestral demon's words seemed to predict the future. He must have his reasons for saying so. Perhaps Suyu himself had not realized that he had mastered something that ordinary people could not. Combined with what he had just seen, the double ultimacy emperor, he was even more certain of his judgment. It's okay. The Flood Dragon Emperor thought for a moment and said, If you need me, just tell me. I want to follow you in the coming days. Follow me? Suyu shook his head. The danger he encountered was beyond imagination. If he followed him, not only would he not be able to find the way forward, but he might also die. However, Suyu did not reject it. After thinking for a while, he said, You are called the mysterious fairy of the ninth heaven. Yes, the Flood Dragon Monarch said sincerely. To be precise, she is one of the thousands of soul fragments of the Empyrean fairy. Suyu thought for a moment, then asked, How many years have you lived? About half an era. The Empyrean fairy answered honestly. My original body was once the pathmaster of the Temple of Heaven. After learning about the truth of the absolute beginning realm, I fled the Temple of Heaven and split my soul into millions of parts, each possessing a different living being in hopes of avoiding disaster. Half an era? This was not the first time Suyu had heard of the word era. What is an era? An epoch refers to the amount of time a true world has existed. The Flood Dragon Emperor was quite knowledgeable. For example, the Great Beginning Realm is a real world, meaning a real world. Cavern worlds and the inner worlds of some giant beasts are ultimately spaces. The Absolute Beginning Realm is the true world, a world that can accommodate everything. That's why it's called a true world. The time the true world lasts for is known as an aeon. Suyu's eyes lit up slightly, and he reached out and said, Please sit down and talk. The Flood Dragon Emperor was overjoyed and sat down with Suyu to talk. Fate really made fools of people. Not long ago, the Flood Dragon Emperor was in this palace, preparing to kill Suyu. Who would have thought that not long after, the two of them were talking peacefully? Suyu had many questions that he hadn't had time to ask the indestructible ancestral demon. The Empyrean fairy in front of him was an existence who had lived for countless years. He could learn more about the secrets of the world from her. The beginning and end of an era are all decided by the stone-birth son of heaven? Suyu asked. The Flood Dragon Emperor looked at the sky, pointed to himself, and waved his hand, meaning that he didn't dare to answer this question. Once he answered, he would definitely be sensed by the way of heaven and be erased from the world. Suyu suddenly realized that once he spoke about the end of the world, it would indeed lead to the destruction of the way of heaven. For example, the common people's pathmaster. His remnant soul wanted to say something, but it was erased by a mysterious hand. After a moment's thought, Suyu released a small world of 30 feet and enveloped the two of them. When he was first enveloped by this world, the Flood Dragon Emperor was slightly puzzled. When he sensed it, his face changed drastically, and he cried out in horror, This is a real world? Unlike other worlds, Suyu's 30 feet small world was indeed a real world that could stand on equal footing with the Great Beginning Realm. How is this possible? How could a small world be born in a real world like the Great Beginning Realm? If Suyu's small world continued to expand, wouldn't he be able to control an entire real world and become a supreme being like the stone-birth son of heaven? His breathing quickened. At this moment, he finally understood why the indestructible ancestral demon said that Suyu is the one who showed him the way forward. If he controlled a small world, he might be able to compete with the destruction of the world in the future. The small world was isolated from the great beginning realm. No matter what he said, the way of heaven of the great beginning realm couldn't sense it. He relaxed a lot and cupped his fists. Since Mr. Su has asked, I will tell you everything I know. Suyu felt a little awkward about the way he addressed her. She was attached to the body of the Flood Dragon Demon Emperor. Sensing that something was wrong, the Flood Dragon Demon Emperor's body shone with golden light. Then, the golden light dissipated, revealing a beautiful woman in black clothes. Her face was glowing softly, and her voice was feminine again. She said, I have been rude. She then said, Mr. Su, the great beginning realm is a real world that exists naturally, but it is occupied by a group of people from an unknown place. They call themselves the people of chaos, and they occupy the birthplace of the real world, the holy mountain. Suyu said in a low voice, then, why do they start eras after eras? For immortality. The mysterious fairy of the ninth heaven really knew a lot of secrets. When the world has a lifespan, who can live forever? The mysterious fairy of the ninth heaven sighed. In order to ensure that they will never perish, the people of chaos will start to destroy the world whenever they are ordered to reach the end. They will collapse the whole great beginning realm and bury all living creatures except the people of chaos. After everything in the world is destroyed, it will turn into unimaginable energy and return to the holy mountain. Taking this opportunity, the 10 emperors absorb that energy and continue to extend their lives. Then, they use the holy mountain to start a new round of creation. With the great beginning energy in the holy mountain, they create all living things in the world. When their lifespan is about to end, they destroy the world again. And so, the cycle continues, forming one era after another. After listening, Suyu's eyes lit up with understanding. Then he muttered, everything is for immortality, so the people of the world can be slaughtered at will and become their sacrifices. A touch of hatred surged in Suyu's heart. It was not only Suyu's hatred, but also the hatred of countless people. Why should they become the tools of the Stone Birth Emperor's immortality? Now this era is coming to an end. All the powerful beings who know the truth of the world are trying their best to resist the destruction of the world, hoping to survive until the next era. I am one of them, the mysterious fairy of the ninth heaven said. So he did not say a word. In his opinion, what was the point of living until the next era? In the end, they were just livestock raised by the Stone Birth Emperor. This time, they were lucky enough to escape the slaughter. As long as they were still in the circle, they would still be food for the Stone Birth Emperor. Moreover, the more fat they were raised, the easier it was to become the next target. Therefore, there were powerful beings in the later stages of the world who chose to resist. Among them, there was the human ancestor, whose soul was destroyed and body did not die. With the power of one person, he fought the Stone Birth Emperor alone. He successfully killed one and shattered another, creating a legend that inspired the world. As long as there was a guardian similar to the human ancestor in every era, there would be no need to worry about the chaos not being destroyed and the emperor not dying. Although Su Yu did not have the unparalleled benevolence of the human ancestor who regarded the world as his responsibility. However, for the sake of Qin Xianer, he could. He was willing to imitate the human ancestor and fight against the holy mountain and the chaos. After understanding the unknown secrets of the world, Su Yu paused for a long time before gradually digesting it. Thinking of something, he said, since you are a member of the Palace of Heaven, do you understand why all the Path Masters dream of a game of chess before they die? This question was entrusted to Su Yu by the Master of the Heaven Remnant Path. However, it happened suddenly, and there had been no opportunity to ask the undying ancestral demon. The mysterious fairy of the ninth heaven was very knowledgeable, and she came from the Temple of Heaven, so she might know some secrets. Hearing this, the Empyrean fairy revealed a trace of fear and hatred in her eyes. She said, what else could it be? Of course, it's because some stone-birth heavenly son was injured or needed for cultivation, so he used the heavenly Tao to arbitrarily deprive a Tao master of his lifespan. As for why I dreamed of playing chess, based on my understanding, it should be related to the sacred mountain. When I was in the Temple of Heaven, I accidentally heard our temple master mention that there used to be a young man who played chess on the sacred mountain. Later on, when the stone-birth son of heaven descended, that young man disappeared. That trace of dreamland should have something to do with the chessboard that the youth is playing on. A young chess player? Suyu remembered that when he was flipping through the wordless heavenly book and was engrossed in it, he had seen a young man playing chess. Could it be that the young man playing chess that the fairy of the ninth heaven mentioned was him? Although he did not understand the meaning behind it, he finally got the answer as promised. He could explain it to the heaven-crippling Tao master. If you have any other questions, this concubine will be happy to answer them, said the Empyrean fairy. Suyu thought for a moment, then said, "One last question. Do you know where the holy land of Western Bliss is?" Upon hearing this, the fairy of the ninth heaven shook her head. "I've heard of it, but I'm afraid very few people could tell the exact location of the Holy Land at that time." "Why?" "Because the Holy Land of Western Bliss is always moving, and people who are not fated to meet it can't meet it." "Moving?" No wonder the undying ancestral demon asked him to look for the multi-eyed boy first. The multi-eyed boy might have some special technique, and he could see the location of the Holy Land of Western Bliss. "Have you heard of the multi-eyed boy?" Upon hearing this, the fairy of the ninth heaven had a strange look on her face. "Him? Are you sure you want to meet him?" Chapter 2135. "No, but the multi-eyed boy has some special fetishes. You might not be able to stand it." "It's okay. Just tell me how to find him." Since Suyu insisted on looking for him, the fairy of the nine heavens would not stop him. She said, "He spends most of his time in the most famous gambling star. If you go there, you should be able to find him." "Gambling star?" Suyu nodded and put away the small world. "Thank you for your answer." "It's my pleasure." The fairy of the nine heavens looked at Suyu and said, "From now on, I will follow you. If you need my help, I might be able to help you." Suyu would naturally not reject her request. With a pathmaster by his side, everything would be much safer. Bang! Suddenly, several half-path masters barged in, followed by Huangfu Laiyang and Mo Xiaochai. It was hard for them not to notice such a huge commotion. Huangfu Laiyang and Mo Xiaochai were dumbfounded when they opened the door and took a look at what was happening inside Suyu's morgue. Suyu? Huangfu Laiyan could not believe his eyes. Mo Xiaochai also looked at Suyu, who was sitting in front of the table. "He should be dead." Suyu looked at the two of them and was slightly stunned. Then he understood why his body was suddenly found. Someone must have used the demon realm's forbidden fairy artifact. Suyu did not say a word. He laughed and walked forward to give Huangfu Laiyang a bear hug. Huangfu Laiyang was so happy that he cried. He immediately started chatting with Suyu as if there was no one else around. He wondered why Huangfu Laiyang, who should have died, was still alive. Suyu briefly explained the reason. Huangfu Laiyang and Mo Xiaochai were dumbfounded. How could there be such a coincidence? Suyu's body was destroyed, and the purple-haired Suyu's body was separated. Thus, Suyu could find his original body again. As a token of gratitude, please accept this small gift. Suyu pointed at Mo Xiaochai's belly. It was the comprehension he had gained when he achieved the path of all gods. If he gave it to Huangfu Liang's child, he could become the god of all gods like Suyu in the future. In other words, he would have the saint body of all gods. To be precise, this child also contained the pure blood of the immortal ancestor. It was impossible to predict what kind of body would be born from this combination. "Thank you, Brother Su." Huangfu Laiyang was extremely excited. Mo Xiaochai was also very grateful. Displeasure appeared on the faces of the three half-step Tao masters as they stared at Suyu and questioned, "Empress Dowager, can this person really be trusted? This corpse is filled with a considerable amount of evil energy." Indeed, because the body had been controlled by the purple-haired Suyu for a long time, it had accumulated a lot of evil energy. Let's search his soul first and confirm his identity, said another half-step Dowlord. However, a voice that caused the three half-step Dowlords to shudder suddenly resounded. Why don't you search my soul first? The three half-step Dowlords looked in the direction of the voice, and they saw that a figure had suddenly appeared on the empty seat. The three half-step Dowlords turned pale with fright when they saw him, and they hurriedly knelt down and said, "Demon Emperor." It turned out that the mysterious fairy of the 9 heavens had disappeared for a moment. She, who did not want others to see her true appearance, turned back into the Demon Emperor. The mysterious fairy of the 9th heaven snorted lightly. "The three of you are very bold. How dare you suspect my friend?" The three half-step Dowlords shivered as they said, "Welcome back, Demon Emperor." As they spoke, they looked at Imo Xiaochai's belly with pity. It was really a pity that the current Demon Emperor was still here, and the unborn Demon Clan's royal family couldn't become the Demon Emperor. The mysterious fairy of the 9 heavens looked at Su Yu, then at Imo Xiaochai's belly. She then said calmly, "I've already stepped down from the Demon Emperor's position. From now on, the unborn Demon Clan's royal family will inherit the throne." The three half-step Dowlords were overjoyed, but they still spoke in fear. Huang Fulayang and Imo Xiaochai were quite surprised. What was going on with Su Yu? How could he influence the position of the Demon Emperor? They had clearly sensed something unusual from the way the Demon Emperor had looked at Su Yu. Huang Fulayang chuckled bitterly in his heart. No matter where he went, Su Yu is always the same. "Brother Su, why don't you stay here and live a good life with us in the demon realm?" Huang Fulayang suggested. After controlling the vast demon realm, he could already control his own fate. He could totally settle down here. Su Yu sighed inwardly. Sometimes, ignorance was bliss. 100 years would be the end of the era. At that time, the demon realm wouldn't be able to escape the destruction of the world. "Thank you, but I have more important things to do." Su Yu shook his head. He didn't tell them the truth of the world. Instead, he wrote a letter on the spot and handed it to Huang Fulayang. He said, "Find a reliable person and deliver this letter to the Tianqin Pathmaster in the Yellow Palace in the Blue Mirror Civilization Department." Huang Fulayang couldn't stop him. He could only sigh and say, "I will do it for you." Su Yu thought to himself, perhaps this was the best ending. If he had asked the indestructible ancestral demon, the Tianqin Pathmaster would have been turned into ashes by now. Now he could still live, but he didn't know when he would die. After catching up with the two of them for a while, Su Yu said goodbye to them and said, "See you later." They used the transportation portal and headed to the faraway gambling star. Several years later, in the Yellow Palace Civilization Department, a letter fell into the hands of the Tianqin Pathmaster. Opening it, the Tianqin Pathmaster's eyes were filled with sorrow. "I should have thought of this earlier. The cultivation of my generation is only for the sake of feeding the supreme being in the dark." They had cultivated and worked hard all their lives, but it turned out that they were just nourishment for others. A great sorrow emerged in his eyes. He had long known the truth of the world, so he had lost the fighting spirit of his youth. Because he knew very well that no matter how hard he worked, he would eventually be sacrificed for others. However, he didn't expect that even though he lived in a remote corner, he still couldn't escape the fate of becoming nourishment for others. The chess encounter in the dream was a sign that he was going to become nourishment for the stone-born son of heaven. After a long time, he put down the letter. His heart thumped, and he crushed something. It was the seal that controlled the attacks of the 3 Pathmasters that were given to Su Yu. Now that it was broken, Su Yu could use it at will. Haha, now that you know the truth, do you still want to continue exploring further? The Tianqin Pathmaster said to himself. He used to have the same dream as Su Yu, wanted to explore the great beginning realm. However, after learning the truth, he was disheartened. From then on, he joined the Yellow Palace and lived his days in a muddle. Boom! Just as he was thinking, a boundless tsunami came from the void. The entire void was boiling, as if there was a giant whale in the sea, pushing the seawater. The void was like that, surging rapidly, shifting all the small civilizations floating in the void. The enormous ecliptic palace even began to tremble. The shocking phenomenon caused the faces of everyone in the Yellow Palace to change drastically. More than 10 path masters rose into the air. One of them, a path master with disheveled hair and a torn robe, had an unfathomable aura. In front of him, the other path masters seemed incomprehensible. Palace Master, you've come out of seclusion. The Buddha path master with a wide body immediately came forward to greet him. The Yellow Palace Master had been in seclusion for hundreds of millions of years and had never come out. Now he was alarmed. The Yellow Palace Master had a grave look in his eyes and said, "How can I not come when the sinful woman is here? The sinful woman of the Heavenly Palace?" The Tiankin Path Master's eyes flashed, and he couldn't believe it. Wasn't it rumored that she was killed by the stone-born son of heaven many years ago? The Yellow Palace Master shook his head slightly. Is it really so easy to kill the number one person below the stone-born son of heaven? I think she was imprisoned by the stone-born son of heaven. Now, she finally broke out of seclusion. As they spoke, the boundless void fiercely slammed over, causing the huge civilization of the Yellow Palace to shake continuously. It was as if the Yellow Palace was a small boat in the void that could capsize at any time. Roar! A huge dragon roar came, causing all the Path Masters, including the Yellow Palace Master, to tremble. Looking into the distance, one could see a snow-white dragon rampaging through the void. Everywhere it passed, it caused the void to ripple. When it arrived at the Yellow Palace Master, the snow-white dragon leaped into the sky above the Yellow Palace Master and floated in a cross-legged position. His enormous breath caused all living beings below the level of Tao Lord to feel extreme heat as he breathed in and out. However, the dragon did not say a word, as if it was quietly waiting for someone to give the order. Who is the local Yellow Palace Master? Suddenly, a clear and beautiful voice came from the top of the dragon's head. The voice was not loud, but in the ears of all the Path Masters, it gave them a strange feeling, causing them to be in a trance. This caused the expressions of the Path Masters to change greatly. Just one sentence could affect their state of mind. What was the cultivation of the sinful lady? Song Jing Yellow Palace Master, Nanjia, greets the sinful lady. The Yellow Palace Master greeted. The sinful lady looked down from above and said indifferently, "Have you seen this person in the faculty of civilization?" A huge portrait of Suyu floated in the sky above the Yellow Palace Master. Seeing this, the expressions of everyone present changed. Among them, the heaven-crippling Path Master's expression changed the most drastically, followed by the Heaven Wings Path Master. Nanjia was slightly puzzled and said, "I have been in isolation for many years, and I have never seen him." The sinful lady looked at the rest of the people, but no one was willing to answer. It was not that they had never seen Suyu, but that they had seen Suyu but were unwilling to tell. "I have seen him." The Heaven Wings Path Master stood up and said respectfully, "Suyu came to the Yellow Palace Master and stayed for some time. His beloved disciple, Luo Shun of the East, died tragically at the hands of Suyu. Due to the heaven-crippling Path Master's partiality, the Heaven Wings Path Master couldn't do anything to him. He could only secretly tell the sinful lady's people, Ziguan, that Suyu's whereabouts were in the demon realm. Now, he stood up to expose Suyu. The sinful lady nodded slightly, but the epic-making dragon under her feet laughed coldly. "How can you understand the Master's great path? She has long sensed Suyu's specific location and deliberately tested you to see which one of you is loyal to the Master." Hearing this, the Heaven Wings Path Master was overjoyed. If he could follow the sinful lady, he might be able to avoid the great calamity in 100 years. He was very glad that he had made the right choice. The rest of the Path Masters looked at the Heaven Wings Path Master with jealousy in their eyes, including the Palace Master. Following the sinful lady would be a meteoric success. The sinful lady looked at the Heaven Wings Path Master and nodded slightly. "From now on, you will follow me." However, before the Heaven Wings Path Master could rejoice, the sinful lady said, "However, I hate men very much, so you have to swallow this pill." This was exactly the same pill that had turned Huangfu Liang and the others into women. Chapter 21:36. The heavenly wings Tao Lord was stunned. Turn into a woman, and forever? A great sense of regret shrouded his heart. If he were to be reduced to a woman for the rest of his life, what was the point of having a high cultivation? The ecliptic hall master, heaven-shattered Tao Lord, Buddhist Tao Lord, and the others glanced at each other, and they acted as if it had nothing to do with them. Likes to tip others off? Retribution has come. It was said that many of the women in the sinful lady palace were transformed from men. Moreover, the sinful lady palace would usually arrange marriages in order to maintain their relationship with the various great forces. As one of them, the Empyrean Wings Tao Lord probably couldn't avoid the fate of becoming a partner with a man. The heaven-crippling Tao Lord almost laughed out loud when he thought of that scene. What? Still not going to accept the medicinal pill? The sinful lady said indifferently. A dignified aura enveloped him, causing the Empyrean Wings Tao Lord to feel bitter in his heart. He trembled as he accepted the pill. Eat it. The sinful lady cast a threatening gaze at him. The heavenly Wings Tao Lord gritted his teeth and swallowed it in front of everyone. As a result, her body immediately changed. Her chest arched and her lower body shrunk. Her originally feminine face became even more feminine. Apart from the fact that his clothes were still that of a man, his body had completely become that of a woman. Moreover, she was quite pretty. The Skywing Daylord's heart was bleeding, but he didn't dare to complain. Come with me. The sinful woman waved her hand, and the female Tao Lord of Skywings was immediately pulled onto the Genesis dragon. With a dragon roar, he swaggered off. Phew! Everyone in the Yellow Tao Palace heaved a sigh of relief. The pressure the evil girl gave them was abnormally strong. They even had a feeling that as long as Sinful Girl was willing, she could easily destroy the entire Ecliptic Palace, and no one would be able to escape. We've dodged a calamity. Pass down my order. Immediately seal the Ecliptic Palace. Within 100 years, the Ecliptic Palace will be in seclusion forever. The Palace Master was silent for a long time before he made a huge decision. The hearts of all the Tao Lords trembled. 100 years. Actually, it was less than 100 years. The destruction and rebirth of an era is about to arrive, right? Who would be able to survive this destruction? Gambling Star. On a civilization planet with hundreds of Zodiac Temple civilization systems, in the most prosperous gambling city, Su Yu and the Flood Dragon Divine Warrior walked among them. The prosperity of this city was many times greater than that of the Seven Night Gods. Gamblers from all over the world gathered here. So you saw quite a few half-step Tao Lords along the way. Occasionally, the aura of a Tao Master would appear. In the sacred city of gambling, there were tens of thousands of large and small casinos. As far as I know, the multi-eyed boy has been addicted to gambling his entire life. He has been in many casinos all year round. But as for which casino he will be in, that will depend on our luck, said the Flood Dragon King. The multi-eyed boy had never picked a casino. It did not mean that he would be in one just because the casino was big. Sometimes, they would even appear in inconspicuous little casinos. Therefore, it was not easy to find them. Su Yu and the Flood Dragon Divine Warrior tried to find a few houses, but each house was crowded with people. It was difficult to find them. It's not a good idea to continue searching like this, Su Yu said. The Flood Dragon Emperor asked. The multi-eyed boy's whereabouts are uncertain. If you want to find him, you can only rely on luck. Su Yu felt a sense of urgency. He didn't have much time. Even though he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, his intuition told him that the sinful woman had surely come out of her closed-door cultivation and was rushing towards him. With the sinful girl's powerful cultivation, it was only a matter of time before she caught up with him. Keep looking, Su Yu said. The multi-eyed boy's characteristics were very obvious. He had eyes all over his body. As long as he appeared in front of him, he could usually be easily seen. After several days of fruitless searching, Su Yu held his temper and stared at one of the largest casinos. This casino was founded by the ruler of the Gambling Star, the Gambling Saint Master. Not only was his cultivation strong, but he was also proficient in gambling. He had gambled with others countless times in his life and had never lost. The casino he founded was full of all kinds of gambling methods. The gamblers were also varied and unexpected. "Let's go in and have a look," Suyu said. He entered the casino. It was a place of its own space. The sky above the space was flickering with many things. Those were the chips of all the gamblers in the casino. Most of them were gambling coins, but 10% were non-currency. Among them were common treasures, talismans, and so on. Occasionally, talismans of the Pathmaster level appeared, but they were soon annihilated, indicating that the chips had fallen into the hands of the winners. In addition, there were many uncommon things, such as women, the enlightenment of the Pathmaster, and even the sealing of a certain civilization by a powerful being, using it as a bargaining chip to gamble with others. Suyu gasped in amazement. When he was about to say something, his eyes suddenly focused on one of the chips. The heaven-searching mirror can find the whereabouts of anyone within a certain range. Suyu looked at the introduction of the chip and was excited. After identifying the area where the chip was located, Suyu rushed over immediately, only to find that it was a rather high-class gambling table. 3 Pathmasters were competing with each other, and one of them was the gambling Saint Master himself. Opposite him were 2 twins, a boy and a girl. What was slightly surprising was that they were quite young. It seemed that they had cultivated for less than 200 years. Such a young Pathmaster? So he was a little surprised. There is always someone better than you. Around the gambling table, there were already many strong people watching the duel between the 3 Pathmasters. This must be the second time for the twins to come to the Gambling Star, right? Last time, they lost half of 6-star civilization, and they still haven't learned their lesson. Why are they here to gamble again? They are rich and overbearing. They might control more than one 6-star civilization. I really don't know where they came from. I have never heard of such a pair of twin Pathmasters. Maybe they come from a faraway place. However, I think they came here for nothing. It won't be easy to win the world destroying dust from the hands of the gambling Saint Master. Upon hearing this, Suyu looked at the 2 objects on the gambling table. The chip that the twins mentioned was a mirror in the shape of a human face, which emitted a somewhat strange feeling. The gambling Saint Master took out a speck of dust that was tightly sealed by 18 layers of seals. It looked like an ordinary speck of dust, but it was wrapped up in an extremely solemn manner. It was obviously not an ordinary object. As for the twin Pathmasters, they stared at the speck of dust intently. Their eyes were burning with desire. Gambling Saint Master, are you really not going to sell this world-destroying dust? We are willing to pay half of a 6-star civilization, the twins said in unison. The gambling Saint Master laughed and said, I have never sold anything in my life. If you want to get something from me, there are only 2 ways. First, bet with me. If you win, I can take it away. Second, snatch it. If you can snatch it away, then I lose. After a moment of silence, the twin Pathmasters said, Let's bet. The gambling Saint Master had lived for countless years. The fact that he was still alive meant that the person who had set his eyes on him was most likely no longer in this world. A wise choice. The gambling Saint Master smiled lightly. In fact, everyone knew that this was the most unwise choice. Since ancient times, no one had ever won a bet with the gambling Saint Master. He had never lost in his life. Rather than gambling, it was better to snatch it. However, no one, including the Flood Dragon Emperor, noticed that Suyu was staring at the world destroying dust with a strange look in his eyes. He couldn't be more familiar with that speck of dust. In fact, no one in the great beginning realm was more familiar with it than him. The so-called world-destroying dust was none other than the supreme growing soil in the 9-jade spiritual pearl, which covered an entire herb garden. There were more than 1 million grains of the supreme growing soil. He had thought about it for a long time and knew that it was extraordinary. However, he didn't expect it to be the world-destroying dust that even the Pathmaster desired. He was willing to exchange half of a 6-star civilization for. The Flood Dragon Emperor stared at the world-destroying dust with deep fear in his eyes. He took a deep breath and said, To be able to see the world-destroying dust with my own eyes is worth the trip. What is the world-destroying dust? Suyu asked. The Flood Dragon Emperor said, "It is a very special kind of dust that comes from the holy mountain. Every grain is unbearable for a civilization. Once it falls, it can easily crush a civilization. The stone-born son of heaven destroyed an era with the help of this dust. He blew it to the entire great beginning realm. Wherever it passed, all civilizations were crushed. That is why it is called the world-destroying dust." Suyu suddenly remembered that when he passed by a 5-star civilization, the civilization was suddenly crushed into dust by something. Could it be because of the everlasting dust? The everlasting dust is a supreme holy object used by many path masters who are related to the earth attribute to craft Tao artifacts. Adding 1 grain into it will increase the power of the Tao artifact by several times. Suyu's heart was in turmoil. If 1 grain could destroy a civilization, then if all the supreme growing soil in its nursery was poured out wherever the dust passed, everything would be destroyed. Suddenly, he remembered what he had seen in the image. The human ancestor had smashed a corner with the cauldron. The dust in the 9 jade spiritual pearl must have come from that corner. It had been collected by the remnant soul of the 9-tailed white fox and placed in the heavenly law's death eye. He had never thought that it would all benefit Suyu. The gambling has begun. The Flood Dragon Emperor's reminder pulled Suyu back to reality. Looking over, the twin Pathmasters and the gambling Saint Pathmaster each held 3 golden leaves in their hands. Different golden leaves were marked with different points. This was a very common gambling method in casinos, comparing the number of points. Each golden leaf had a very unique aura. It was very difficult to cheat. "Let's lay our cards on the table," the gambling Saint Pathmaster said slowly. The twin Pathmasters took a deep breath and put down all the golden leaves in their hands together with the gambling Saint Pathmaster. The twin Pathmasters had a total of 17 points. The gambling Saint Pathmaster had 18 points. He had only a little more than them. Alas, the twin Pathmasters were deeply disappointed and could not help but beat their chests and stomp their feet. Just a little more. Suyu looked on coldly from the side and looked at the gambling Saint Pathmaster meaningfully. How could it be such a coincidence that his points were just a little higher? According to the gambling agreement, this heaven-seeking mirror belongs to me. The gambling Saint Pathmaster took the mirror in his hand. The twin Pathmasters looked unwilling and said, "One more time. This time, we will use the other half of the 6-star civilization as a bargaining chip." Hearing this, the audience burst into an uproar again. The twin Pathmasters would not stop until they got the world-destroying dust. The gambling Saint Pathmaster laughed. "I will not refuse anyone." He was about to put away the mirror and leave the world-destroying dust alone when suddenly a voice interrupted from the side. "Why don't I join in as well?" Chapter 21:37. Hearing this, the 3 Pathmasters and the onlookers looked at the speaker. A young man from the human race walked out with a calm expression. The gambling Saint Pathmaster furrowed his brows slightly and looked away as if nothing had happened. The onlookers couldn't help but laugh. Where did this human come from? How could he be so blind? This is a bet between the Pathmasters. How could an Imperial warrior like him participate? He's probably interested in the chips and wants to try his luck. Hey, human, if you want to participate in the bet, you should at least take out a chip of equal value, right? You can't just use a path coin to bet with the Pathmasters on their amazing treasures, can you? The onlookers burst into laughter. They obviously didn't believe a trifling Imperial warrior could take out something that could be used to bet with the Pathmasters. Suyu took out a speck of dust expressionlessly and held it in his palm. However, as soon as he took it out, the 3 Pathmasters looked at him in shock. The twin Pathmasters stood up abruptly, their eyes shining brightly as they said in unison, "World destruction dust." The gambling Saint Pathmaster's eyes shone brightly as he asked in disbelief, "Where did you get the world destruction dust?" Suyu replied calmly, "Since when did the gambling star start asking the gamblers about the origin of their chips?" The gambling Saint Pathmaster knew he had made a slip of the tongue, so he looked at Suyu and said, "Fine, you are qualified to bet with us." The onlookers were in an uproar as they looked at Suyu in shock. Where did this guy get the world destruction dust? The world destruction dust rarely appeared in the world. The known world destruction dust only existed in the ruins of civilizations that had collapsed for many years. Moreover, one could only find one dust in hundreds of collapsed civilizations. The ruins of those civilizations were usually buried in the deepest part of nothingness, and only Tao Lords or above could infiltrate them. Once one was found, it would lead to a great battle between Path Masters. Therefore, it was extremely difficult to get a single world destruction dust. So, how did this human get the world destruction dust? It was really puzzling. They were so suspicious that they didn't even consider that Suyu might have more world destruction dust. Suyu walked over with the world destruction dust in his hand. The gambling Saint Path Master's eyelids twitched slightly as he said, "Brother, please be careful and don't drop it." Once the dust left his palm and fell, at least half of the gambling star would collapse. "It doesn't matter," Suyu said casually. Because he possessed the 9-jade spiritual pearl, the dust here was under his control as well. Thus, it was as light as a feather in his hand, so he didn't have to worry about it suddenly falling down and injuring the gambling star. "What do you want to bet with the everlasting dust?" The gambling sage Tao Master stared at the speck of dust with a fiery gaze. He had countless treasures in his possession, but there were very few that could compare to the everlasting dust. The Tao Master had many treasures, but few could compare. He said it was a gift because up until now, no one had been able to defeat him. There was no one in the past, and there would never be one in the future. "The heaven-seeking mirror in your hand," Suyu said. The gambling Saint Tao Master was astonished. In terms of value, the heaven-seeking mirror actually couldn't compare to the apocalyptic dust. It was only half as valuable. Master, the king. Suyu asked in reply, "Do you want to exchange it?" The gambling sage Tao Master wanted to trade, but he had already said that there were only two ways to take the item from his hands. The first was to snatch it, and the second was to gamble and refuse to trade. As a reputable Tao Master, there was no way he could take back his words. Moreover, he was sure to win. Why would he trade? "Fine, let's make a bet," the gambling saint said. "I will bet on both of you. Whoever wins can take what he wants from me. If he loses, he has to give it to me. What do you think?" "No problem." Suyu and the twin Tao Masters nodded. The gambling saint said, "Let's start." He clenched his palm. 100 leaves appeared on the table. "Who will pick first?" As soon as he finished speaking, the unwilling twin Tao Lords rushed to say, "I'll go first." The rule was that each of them could pick 3 leaves. Through the combination of points on the leaves, the higher and lower points were compared. After thinking about it, the twin Tao Masters picked 3 golden leaves. After wiping the light off the leaves, their points were revealed. They were 10 points, 12 points, and 11 points. The highest number of points on the leaves was 12 points, and the highest was 36 points. The twin Tao Lords had obtained a total of 33 points, which was extremely close to the maximum. The twin Tao Masters were very excited. However, their faces were very calm. It was hard to tell whether they were happy or sad. Then, it was Suyu's turn to pick. Suyu checked the golden leaves. He found that even the Law of Soul couldn't see through the cover of the leaves. However, if it was impossible to cheat, how did the gambling sage Pathmaster maintain his undefeated record? People couldn't be lucky all the time. Therefore, the way to cheat was not in the cards, but in the table. Just now, Suyu's sharp senses detected that time had stopped for a moment. It was so subtle that the Tao Masters didn't notice it. However, Suyu sensed it. In other words, at the moment when time was frozen, the golden leaf he had chosen had been tampered with. After thinking for a while, Suyu reached out his fingers and pinched the 3 golden leaves. He used time and space to freeze them. That was the moment when a weak time fluctuation appeared. Sure enough, when time and space were frozen, he saw a blurry shadow flipping over the 3 cards in Suyu's hands to check their points. Then, he replaced the 3 leaves with the ones Suyu was about to take. Moreover, the blurry shadow casually flipped through the few leaves near him to determine which ones had the highest points. At the same time, he memorized the positions of those leaves so that he could take them later. He didn't realize that Suyu, who controlled time and space, could see everything he was doing. It's no wonder that he's undefeated for eternity. With such a cheating method that can freeze time, no one can expose him unless he meets an almighty, Suyu said to himself. When the Saint of Gambling Roadmaster was ready, Suyu made his move. He picked up the 3 replaced leaves under his fingers and looked at them. There was a total of 17 points. Then, he picked up the 3 leaves chosen by the Saint of Gambling Roadmaster and found that they had 34 points. Finally, he looked at the points in the hands of the twin Tao Masters and found that they had 33 points. Did he want to kill both of them? So he thought for a while. Then, he took the leaf with 34 points and put the leaf with 17 points in the position of the 3 leaves chosen by the Saint of Gambling Roadmaster. Just then, the time and space freeze ended. So you picked up the 3 leaves. The Saint of Gambling Roadmaster asked calmly, "Have you made your choice?" Suyu nodded. "It's your turn." The Saint of Gambling Roadmaster couldn't help but laugh. While picking the leaves casually, he sighed with emotion. Comparing points is purely a test of luck. There are no rules to follow. If you can relax and pick at will, you can sometimes get a higher number of points. His words, which seemed to be based on his experience, were praised by the onlookers. All of them regarded it as a treasure book for gambling. Suyu shook his head secretly. How could he cheat in such a dignified way? Apparently, he was a person who only allowed himself to win and didn't allow himself to lose. Most of them were the type of people who couldn't afford to lose. After finding the multi-eyed boy, it would be better for him to leave the gambling star as soon as possible and avoid contact with this person. Therefore, comparing points is my least favorite way of gambling. There is no technique involved in it. It all depends on luck. The Saint of Gambling Roadmaster said. Then he said to the twin Tao Masters and Suyu, "Then, let's lay our cards on the table." Suyu and the twin Tao Masters spread out the 3 leaves in their hands and put them down. As the Saint of Gambling Roadmaster put down his own, he said with a smile, "It seems I won again." When he looked at the points of the twin Tao Masters, he could still say that. However, when he saw Suyu's, his voice stopped abruptly. He looked at his own leaf hurriedly and said in surprise, "How is this possible?" He had clearly replaced Suyu's leaf with 17 points. How could it be his? The 3 leaves that he had his eyes on fell into Suyu's hands. For a moment, he even wondered if he had been in a trance. However, when he came to his senses, he knew he couldn't have made such a low-level mistake. It must be Suyu who had cheated. "Haha, I won. I won." The twin Tao Masters were pleasantly surprised. They couldn't believe they had really won against the legendary Saint of Gambling Roadmaster, who would never lose. Suyu also let out a sigh of relief and said, "I was just lucky." Then, the twin Tao Masters obtained a world-destroying dust from the Saint of Gambling Roadmaster. Suyu obtained the heaven-seeking mirror smoothly. The onlookers were all taken aback by this scene. The Saint of Gambling Roadmaster lost, and he lost to 2 people at the same time. How could this be? Isn't the legend of the Saint of Gambling Road Master's invincibility in gambling broken? The whole gambling house was in an uproar. They had just witnessed the destruction of a legend and the fall of a legend. After Suyu obtained the heaven-seeking mirror, he used it on the spot to prevent people with ill intentions from thinking about it. He intended to use the heaven-seeking mirror to search for the 10,000 Lanterns group. However, it was a pity that the heaven-seeking mirror's effect was limited to people within a certain range. He didn't know where the 10,000 Lanterns group was, so it wouldn't work. If he wanted to find them, he could only look for the multi-eyed boy, who should be on the gambling star. Suyu injected the great desolation power into the mirror and muttered multi-eyed boy in his heart. All of a sudden, a layer of ripples was released from the heaven-seeking mirror, which radiated the whole gambling star. Unknowingly, everyone was scanned, and their souls seemed to be flipped over by some mysterious power, confirming what their names were. Who is he looking for? He can't wait to use it. However, this mirror is really magical. It can search people's memories on its own. Amidst the heated discussion, the heaven-seeking mirror ended its search. To Suyu's great disappointment, The heaven-seeking mirror's mirror finally showed 4 words. No such person found. Chapter 21:38. Throughout his life, the multi-eyed boy spent most of his time in the gambling star. He only left very rarely. Was Suyu's luck that bad? Seeing that Suyu's search was fruitless, the gambling Saint Roadmaster's eyes flashed slightly. He said, "Who are you looking for?" "I've been in the gambling star for many years. Maybe I know something." Suyu glanced at him and said, "The multi-eyed boy." Him? The gambling Saint Roadmaster seemed to think of something, and a hint of fear appeared on his face. Others exclaimed, "Wasn't the multi-eyed boy captured by the Nirvana organization a few years ago?" Hearing this, Suyu was startled. Did he come here for nothing? The Nirvana organization was mysterious and unfathomable. Where could he find it? The Flood Dragon Emperor was also helpless. Suyu had finally defeated the gambling Saint Roadmaster, but the result was like this. It really made people speechless. "Do you need the multi-eyed boy for something?" The gambling Saint Roadmaster asked thoughtfully. Suyu nodded. "I want to use him to find someone." Unexpectedly, the gambling Saint Roadmaster suddenly burst into laughter. "That's a coincidence. I can also help you find that person." "You?" Suyu asked in disbelief. He said, "The person I'm looking for is always on the move, and it's impossible to determine his position." Without saying a word, the gambling Saint Roadmaster took out a golden eyeball, which was still stained with blood. The eyeball was well preserved by a seal. Although it was old, it wasn't damaged at all. The multi-eyed boy's secret to finding people is his eyes, which can see places that ordinary people can't, the gambling Saint Roadmaster said. The gambling Saint Pathmaster said, "Unfortunately, when the multi-eyed boy was young and full of vigor, he once made a bet with me. In the end, he lost everything, so he severed one of his eyes and used it as a bargaining chip. As you can see, he lost to me." Suyu looked at the golden eyeball, thought for a moment, and said, "Do you want me to bet with you again?" "Yes," the gambling Saint Roadmaster said solemnly. "This is the multi-eyed boy's only remaining eye in this world. It's up to you whether you want to bet or not." After thinking about it, Suyu said, "I can bet, but what do you want to bet? What kind of gambling method are you going to use?" The gambling Saint Dowlord paused for a moment before he said, "It'll still be a competition of points. However, let's change the rules. Both sides can ceaselessly increase their chips until one side admits defeat." Suyu mulled it over for a moment, then said, "Do you mean to add an unlimited number of chips?" He did not feel any pressure. There were millions of supreme growing soil. Even if he lacked a few hundred or 1,000 of them, it would not be a big deal. "Let's use 5 times as the upper limit. After 5 times, if neither side admits defeat in advance, we'll have a showdown." "Sure," Suyu agreed without hesitation. The gambling Sage Pathmaster said, "Then, let's start now. Let's count the chips of both sides." He looked at Suyu and asked, "What do you want? Something you want?" Suyu's eyes flickered as he said, "I want at least 10,000 drops of the Pathmaster's blood." Hearing this, everyone gasped. "Hiss, this little human brat really dares to ask for it." 10,000 drops of Daelord's blood was equivalent to all the blood in a Daelord's body. In other words, one had to kill an entire Daelord in order to obtain so much god blood. However, how could a Daelord be so easily killed? Even someone as strong as the gambling Sage Pathmaster had never successfully killed a Daelord in his entire life. At most, he would only seriously injure a few. The gambling Sage Pathmaster was also surprised by Suyu's appetite. He said, "Do you know how precious the Daelord's blood is?" A drop of the Daelord's blood was no less than a peerless treasure to an emperor. Whether it was used to refine divine weapons or to comprehend the great path, it was a precious item that could not be bought with path coins. Moreover, he believed that not many Daelords could possess so much Daelord's blood, unless he extracted his own Daelord's blood, but that was obviously impossible. "If you don't have it, forgive me, but I'm not interested in gambling," Suyu said. He did not lack resources. The only thing he lacked was the Daelord's blood. As long as he obtained 10,000 drops, he could successfully activate the heavenly law death I once. The sinful woman was about to attack, so he had to make early preparations. Seeing Suyu stand up slowly, the gambling sage path master pondered for a while and said, "Okay, I can gamble with you. However, I only have 8,000 drops of Daylord's blood, and I got them from different Daylord gamblers." Upon hearing this, Suyu's eyes lit up. He said immediately, "Okay. However, the Daylord's blood is too precious. I can't use 8,000 drops of it as a bargaining chip. I will split it up and use it as a bargaining chip for 4 rounds. Together with the multi-eyed boy's eye, I will use it for 5 rounds. What do you think?" Suyu nodded. Of course. After thinking for a while, he took out 5 grains of world destruction dust and said, "These are the only 5 grains of world destruction dust I have. They will also be used as a bargaining chip for 5 rounds." Upon seeing this, the people present gasped again. Five grains. Who is that human? What's his background? It's impossible. There's so much world destruction dust. He couldn't have picked it up even if he was lucky. The gambling sage pathmaster was breathing rapidly. His face was filled with greed as he said, "Those who are not involved, please step back. The gambling game starts now." After clearing the area, the gambling sage pathmaster grabbed another handful of golden leaves and placed them on the gambling table. Then, he spread them out and said, "Who wants to pick first? Let me do it," Suyu said, unwilling to pass on the responsibility. "Please." The gambling sage pathmaster's eyes shone brightly. Suyu's eyes were calm as he activated time and space freeze immediately. Everything in the world was frozen except for him. He flipped through the golden leaves and confirmed the positions of the 5 golden leaves with the highest points. Then he stepped back. When time and space flowed normally, Suyu reached out and picked up the 12 golden leaves he had picked. After getting it, he scraped off the golden light on it and found it was indeed 12 points. Maybe the gambling sage pathmaster had learned his lesson and didn't use the time law again. Then, the gambling sage pathmaster took one for himself. After drawing 3, they looked at each other. "Do you want to continue?" The gambling sage pathmaster asked. If Suyu didn't continue, the world destruction dust he placed on the table would belong to the gambling sage pathmaster. Suyu said, "Continue." Both of them pushed a world destruction dust and a portion of the pathmaster's blood onto the gambling table. Then, both of them took out a golden leaf. So far, all 4 of Suyu's golden leaves were 12 points, which meant he was going to win. "Continue." Both of them didn't intend to stop. They were both very confident in their cards. As the chips of both sides continued to accumulate, the onlookers' eyes turned red. How long has it been since I last saw such a shocking gamble? It's only second to the gambling sage pathmaster's fight against 10 pathmasters, right? No, the chips of that time were far less amazing than this. 8,000 drops of the pathmaster's blood and 5 world destruction dust. My God, how many pathmasters would be jealous of such chips? The onlookers couldn't help but get excited. They stared at both sides, increasing the chips without blinking. Finally, the chips accumulated to the upper limit. The gambling sage pathmaster's palms were sweating. This was the first time he had encountered such a huge gamble. Even with his temperament, he couldn't help but feel nervous. If he lost this battle, then he would lose at least 10% of what he had accumulated in his life. He couldn't afford to lose this battle. "Show your cards," the gambling sage pathmaster said. Suyu nodded slightly and stared at the 5 leaves in his palm. He didn't put them down immediately. Instead, he stared at the points on the leaves and spread them out bit by bit. Although it was a sure win, if he was careless, he might fail miserably. As expected, when Suyu was about to spread out the leaves completely, an imperceptible fluctuation flashed across the leaves. The points on the leaves changed drastically. Some changed from 12 points to 2 points, and some changed to 10 points. However, the situation where he was confident of winning immediately disappeared. On the other hand, a strange smile appeared in the depths of the gambling sage pathmaster's eyes. "It's a trap." Suyu immediately used time and space freeze to freeze the posture of both sides when they put down their cards. He took the opportunity to look at the gambling sage pathmaster's cards and was surprised to find that all the leaves in his hand were Suyu's. There were 8 leaves with 12 points. There's something wrong with the leaves. These leaves had been tampered with by the gambling sage pathmaster, so he could exchange his opponent's leaves with his own. Suyu's mind was in turmoil. Now, even if he changed the face of the card back, he could still change the face of the card back in the instant he laid his cards on the table. Moreover, his time and space freeze couldn't be used again and again. Suyu's eyes flashed. Suyu stepped forward and took back all his leaves, exchanging them with his opponents. After the time and space freeze ended, an invisible aura appeared around Suyu's body. It was the unique aura of a three-zhang small world. It surrounded Suyu and made him appear in another real world. The gambling sage pathmaster, who was about to flip his cards, kept paying attention to the points of his leaves. When he found that the points of his leaves had been exchanged back silently, he was shocked. Suyu had a strange ability that allowed him to change his leaves in an instant. In the last round, he lost because of this strange ability. He flipped over all the leaves as if nothing had happened. At the same time, he changed the cards in Suyu's hand into his own. In this way, Suyu didn't even have the chance to change his cards. Slap! The 8 leaves were neatly placed in front of the gambling sage pathmaster, and the points on them were seen by everyone. How could Suyu change his cards in front of so many people? If one was found cheating, not only would all his chips be taken away, but he would also be punished by the casino. You have lost, the gambling sage pathmaster said without looking at his cards. 8 cards with 12 points, he would definitely win. However, the onlookers were stunned. As expected of the gambling sage pathmaster, even with such poor cards, he can still say that he will win. Don't talk nonsense if you don't know anything. This is called courage, understand? The gambling sage has always been like this. Alas, when can we learn a little bit of confidence like the gambling sage pathmaster? With such card in his hand, he is confident that he will win. The gambling sage pathmaster was slightly stunned. Chapter 2139. How is this possible? At the last moment, he changed the cards successfully. Why is it still my cards? Suyu put down the 8 leaves in his hand slowly with an indifferent look on his face. Each of them was at 12 o'clock. Holy sh*t. This can't be real, right? 8 cards at 12 o'clock. How could he be so lucky? Cheating. He must be cheating. But he was able to cheat in front of the saint of gambling roadmaster without being exposed. That must be something. Suyu looked at the cards of the saint of gambling roadmaster and said, "It seems I won." The saint of gambling roadmaster looked at his cards absent-mindedly. He couldn't believe how he had lost. It shouldn't be. Those golden leaves had all been refined by him. In just an instant, he could change them according to his thoughts. How could he fail? How could he know that Suyu had just released his small spiritual realm? In the small spiritual realm, he was alone and isolated from the great beginning realm. How could the saint of gambling road master change his cards? Therefore, the last change ended in failure. The saint of gambling road master was full of unwillingness and roared. However, he couldn't do something like shooting himself in the foot in front of everyone. If it was spread out that he couldn't afford to lose, his reputation as the saint of gambling would be gone. I lost the bet, the saint of gambling roadmaster said dejectedly. Then, he cupped his fists and said, "Your gambling skills are superb. I admire you." Suyu immediately put away his 5 grains of world destruction dust, 8,000 drops of the saint of gambling roadmaster's blood, and the most important eye of the multi-eyed boy. He cupped his fist in response and said, "You flatter me. The gambling techniques of the gambling Saint Dao Master are truly impressive." These words seemed to carry deep meaning, and it caused the depths of the gambling Saint Dao Master's eyes to turn gloomy. His cheating methods couldn't escape from the Saint of Gambling Roadmaster's hands. This was the first time he had lost in his life, and he had lost so miserably. 8,000 drops of the Saint of Gambling Roadmaster's blood. He had spent a lot of effort to win it back again and again. Now he had lost it all in one go. How could he bear this humiliation? "Your Excellency, you are a guest from afar. If you have nothing else to do, how about staying on the gambling star for a few more days?" The Saint of Gambling Roadmaster said politely. Suyu said, "No, I have something else to do. I can't stay for long. Goodbye." After saying that, he immediately left the casino. Seeing this, the powerhouses all nodded in agreement. At least this young man didn't let victory get to his head. Just based on the 8,000 Daylord's blood and the multi-eyed boy's eyes that he had just won, if he really dared to stay on the gambling star where all kinds of people mixed together, he would probably not survive for more than 2 hours. As soon as Suyu left, the auras of several half-step Dowlords in the casino followed him. This was because the news had yet to spread. Otherwise, the number of experts who went to follow Suyu would have increased by more than 100 times. The gambling Saint Path Master's heart sank, but he acted as if nothing had happened. He continued to manage the casino for a while before he left unhurriedly. However, after he left, he immediately revealed a murderous look and disappeared in a flash. When he reappeared, he was already in the void. He traversed the void and tracked the aura of the 8,000 Daylord's blood. In the end, his gaze locked onto a meteor. Human brat, don't you think you're walking a bit too fast? A cold light flickered in the gambling Saint Dao Master's eyes as he stared at the falling star. On the meteorite, Suyu soared into the sky with his hands clasped behind his back. He said calmly, "I've been waiting for you for a while. You're too slow." What does that mean? He fixed his gaze on Suyu and was surprised to find that the corpses of the half-step Dowlords who had been chasing Suyu were all lying on the meteorite. They had all been killed in such a short period of time. Looking at the remnant blood on Suyu's sleeves, the gambling Saint Dao Master was slightly surprised. "I didn't expect a human like you to be so powerful. Or should I say, your companions are very powerful?" He slapped his palm in the air in a certain direction. The meteorite where he had slapped his palm suddenly exploded, and a golden-robed man wearing a bamboo hat emerged from the crack of the stone. The aura of a Path Master flowed around him, and he blocked the palm of the gambling Saint Dao Master. "A Path Master of the Demon Realm? Are you the Demon Emperor?" The gambling Saint Dao Master's expression was grave, and his eyes were filled with fear. The Flood Dragon Emperor replied calmly, "Actually, half of what you said just now is correct. The human in front of you is really powerful. He killed those half-step Dowlords with his own hands. I didn't do it myself." With Suyu's current cultivation, killing half-step Dowlords didn't take much effort. Moreover, it was even easier to kill them when they weren't prepared for it. The gambling Saint Dao Master's eyes darkened. "So, you stopped here because you knew I would come?" The Flood Dragon Emperor smiled faintly. "Didn't he say just now that he had been waiting for you for a while?" So you stepped forward and said, "I needed 10,000 drops of Dao blood, and I only won 8,000 drops from your hands. I still lack 2,000 drops. I have no choice but to draw them from your body." Upon hearing this, the gambling Saint Dao Master shouted coldly, "Shameless boasting." Suyu replied calmly, "Whether it's shameless boasting or not, we'll know once we try." With a swish, a shadow appeared in front of his chest. A cone-shaped treasure suddenly appeared and shot toward the gambling Saint Dao Master. The gambling Saint Dao Master's eyes flickered, and he snorted coldly. Insignificant skill. Without hesitation, his entire body was surrounded by the aura of a Path Master, and he easily blocked the Dao Destruction Pestle. However, the surface of the Dao Destruction Pestle suddenly emitted 8-colored light. Impressively, it was 8 kinds of rules. The power of one of the 8 great rules might be limited, but when all 8 of them were gathered together, it was a powerful force in the world. The aura of a Path Master around his body fluctuated violently, and it was broken by the 8 great rules, which struck his path body. 8 different kinds of rules left deep marks on his body. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the Dao Destruction Pestle pierced into his path body without any obstruction. The gambling Saint Dao Master couldn't believe that he had been injured. Inside his chest, a large amount of precious Dao blood flowed out. The Dao Master's blood would only decrease throughout his life. 1 drop less was 1% less, and it would never increase again throughout his life. The lack of the Dao Master's blood affected the aura of the Dao Master. It could be said that the strength of a Dao Master who had dried up his divine blood was on a completely different level from that of a Dao Master who had full blood. He grabbed the hundreds of drops of the Tao Master's blood that had flowed out of his body. However, a wave of the space law took away all the Tao Master's blood in advance, and it fell into Su Yu's hand. There are 1,900 drops left. Thank you, Gambling Saint Tao Master, for releasing some more blood. The Gambling Saint Tao Master flew into a rage. You are looking for death. Destroy. He pointed in the air, and suddenly a majestic Tao formed an illusory world that was similar to a small world. In the world, there were all kinds of gambling devices, and the gambling chips were all their lives. Life and death destiny plate. This was the power of the Tao Master. He had already condensed the rules into a realm. Within this realm, he alone controlled a certain kind of rule, and with this rule, he could give his enemies an extraordinary destructive blow. The Flood Dragon Emperor took off his bamboo hat and said calmly, "Your Excellency, you are looking down on me." His eyes flickered, and suddenly, an ancient artistic conception flowed out, condensing into a sky full of falling flowers and countless fairies dancing together. Two worlds, or rather, the realm of the Tao Master, intertwined and attacked each other. Crack! A violent explosion sounded in the realm of the Gambling Saint Tao Master, and it was quickly crushed. The Gambling Saint Tao Master was shocked. How can your realm be so powerful? They were both Tao Masters, and in theory, as long as they didn't cultivate overly powerful Tao wills, the realms that they condensed were comparable. However, being crushed so easily made the Gambling Saint Tao Master gasp. He realized that he might not be a match for Su Yu. He collected the shattered Tao wills, stared at Su Yu with great pity, and said bitterly, "Count yourself lucky." As he spoke, he turned around to escape. However, the Flood Dragon Emperor obviously didn't intend to let him go. The realm expanded rapidly, enveloping the Gambling Saint Tao Master. Puff! In an instant, the Gambling Saint Tao Master felt as if he had suffered an unimaginably heavy attack. He opened his mouth and spat out a large amount of Tao Master's blood. The blood flowed freely, forming a curtain of rain. Su Yu operated the space law and collected all the Tao Master's blood. After a rough count, he found that there were about 1,800 drops. Including the 100 drops just now, there were 1,900 drops. The Gambling Saint Tao Master was filled with hatred and regret. He clenched his teeth, broke free from the realm, and fled. However, he didn't escape for long. Suddenly, two realms rushed out from the side and enveloped the Gambling Saint Tao Master. The Gambling Saint Tao Master, who was caught off guard, was injured again and spat out a mouthful of Tao Master's blood. A big hand was holding the 100 drops of Tao Master's blood. The Gambling Saint Tao Master was so angry that he spat out blood. Dark-Yin Tao Master and Dark-Yang Tao Master, you sneak attacked me. The ones who attacked him were the twin Tao Masters. They said in unison, in comparison, you cheated and won many things from us. Taking 100 drops of Tao Master's blood is already extremely benevolent. Get lost now. The Gambling Saint Tao Master looked at the twin Tao Masters and then at the Flood Dragon Emperor. He was filled with grievance and fled in a panic. This time, he had suffered a great loss. Not only did he lose his bargaining chips, but he was also besieged by the Flood Dragon Emperor and lost 2,000 drops of Tao Master's blood. His strength would obviously decline. When he was far away, the twin Tao Masters walked up to Su Yu and threw the 100 drops of Tao Master's blood in their palms to him. Su Yu looked at the two of them. "What are you two doing?" The twin Tao Masters looked at Su Yu and said, "If it weren't for you, we might never have gotten the imperishable dust. Thank you." Anyone with a discerning eye could see that the Gambling Saint Tao Master, who was invincible, had lost because of this strange human. He must have sabotaged some of the Gambling Saint Tao Master's tricks in secret. That was why the twin Tao Masters could bask in his glory and went around. Su Yu received the Tao Master's blood and cupped his fists. "Thank you. You're welcome. This imperishable dust is very important to us. We should be thanking you." The two Tao Masters said, "If you come to the heavenly court one day, remember to look for us." As they spoke, They handed a coin to Suyu, which was sometimes cold and sometimes warm. Suyu didn't know what was going on, so he accepted it. The twin Tao masters cupped their fists and left. You're really lucky. I can't believe you met someone from the heavenly court in such a remote civilization. The Flood Dragon Emperor stared at the departing backs of the twin Tao masters, deep surprise in his eyes. Suyu was slightly startled. The heavenly court? What kind of place is that? Why have I never heard of it? Chapter 2140. The heavenly court is a place that even the temple of heaven is afraid of. The Flood Dragon Emperor said, rumor has it that the 8 great ancient gods are worshipped there. 8 ancient gods? Suyu's heart shook violently. Ancient god Jiulong was one of the 8 great ancient gods, right? The 8 great ancient gods were the first 8 Tao Lords to be born in the world. It's said that their strength surpassed the level of Tao Lords and reached the level of myths. The Flood Dragon Emperor was fascinated. Some say that the ancient gods are the existences closest to the stone-born son of heaven. Suyu asked curiously, can the holy mountain tolerate the existence of the heavenly court? Of course not. So many years ago, the heavenly court was destroyed. The Flood Dragon King sighed. The 8 ancient gods are nowhere to be found. I don't know if they were destroyed or hidden. Suyu recalled the message that the ancient god Jiulong had entrusted to him by the wizard ancestor. He headed for the Tao Abyss. But after that, he never came back. No one knew if he was dead or alive. The current heavenly court is only occupied by some living beings who claim to be the descendants of the 8 ancient gods. The Flood Dragon Emperor said, but even so, it is still a legendary holy land that fascinates people. There are many relics of the 8 ancient gods inside. Many talented geniuses went there to admire it, and all of them were able to gain enlightenment from it. There were many who broke through to become Tao Lords. Hearing this, Suyu's heart yearned for it. What sort of existence was the place where ancient God Nine Dragon was worshipped? However, he didn't even need to think to know that it was definitely an extremely distant place, and it wasn't a place he could go to right now. The most important thing now was to quickly find the location of the Western Pure Land. He took out the multi-eyed boy's eye and infused it with the power of desolation. The eye immediately released a dazzling golden radiance. Where is the Western Pure Land? Suyu shouted. His eyeballs rotated on the spot and finally fixed in a certain direction. Then an extremely straight golden light shot out from his eyeballs towards a certain direction in the great void. Suyu's expression relaxed a little. Holding the golden eyeball in his hand, he and the Flood Dragon, divine warriors, stepped into the void and moved forward. The two of them traveled countless miles in an instant, heading straight for that place. Several years later, Demon Realm. On this day, he was suddenly enveloped by an extremely terrifying aura. All the demon chi in the demon realm began to shake violently. In the imperial palace, Missouri Xiao Chai, who was about to give birth, looked up in surprise. That powerful aura caused the fetus in her belly to have a strong reaction. It actually released a blood-red light on its own to fight against it. Quickly use the forbidden immortal embryo Dao tool to protect the fetus, Mo Xiaochai said. Soon after, the 9 forbidden immortal embryos were all taken out. They released extraordinary auras and protected the fetus at the center. Only then did the glow on the surface of the fetus gradually dim. Mo Xiaochai heaved a long sigh, but she couldn't erase the bewilderment in her heart. What kind of existence has descended into the demon world? The epoch-making dragon hovered in the sky above the monster realm. The sinful lady closed her eyes and sensed for a long time. Then, she shook her head slightly and said, "No. However, I discovered something very interesting." The sinful woman made a grabbing motion in the air, and 2 wisps of gas appeared in her palm. One of them was the human ancestor, while the other was the projection of the Een Stonebirth Son of Heaven. Emperor Xiao Yao, if there's a chance, I'll definitely settle the score with you. The reason she was trapped in the Tao Tai's cage for countless years was all because of Emperor Xiao Yao. Let's go. The sinful lady fixed her gaze on the west. In the distant nothingness, Suyu suddenly clutched his heart, feeling a deep sense of oppression for no reason. The 5 crowns on top of his head were also constantly swaying, as if they were about to fall off. "What's wrong with your body?" the Flood Dragon Divine Emperor asked in surprise. Suyu said, "It's a mortal enemy of mine, and he's coming after me." Looking at the constantly swaying crowns on top of Suyu's head, the Flood Dragon Divine Emperor was secretly surprised. He couldn't understand what kind of enemy could cause the crowns to change after locking onto him. This situation could only mean one thing. The enemy was so powerful that his existence alone could destroy all of Suyu's cultivation. "Who is your enemy?" the Flood Dragon Divine Emperor asked. Suyu didn't want to hide it from him. "The sinful lady." "What?" The Flood Dragon Divine Emperor was so shocked that he almost lost his tongue. "Are you sure you're talking about the Sinful Lady Palace Master's Sinful Lady, and not some random woman?" "Random woman? Well, do you mean the Fairy of the 9 Heavens?" The corners of the Flood Dragon Divine Emperor's mouth twitched. "I'm asking a serious question." Suyu nodded. "Yes, that Sinful Lady." The Flood Dragon Divine Emperor sucked in a breath of cold air and looked at Suyu from head to toe, as if getting to know him all over again. "Tell me the truth. How many powerful people in the Great Beginning Realm are there that you haven't offended?" He couldn't believe that a person could attract as much hatred as Suyu. Forget about the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. He was even feared by the Sinful Lady. What kind of person was the Sinful Lady? She was known as the strongest person under the stone-birth sun of heaven. Her cultivation should be extremely close to the legendary 8 great ancient gods. Such a person was actually chasing after Suyu. At this moment, even the Flood Dragon Divine Emperor was a little doubtful about the accuracy of the indestructible ancestral demon's words. Suyu said, "I've probably offended all the known powerful forces, except for the Heaven Court just now." The corners of the Flood Dragon Divine Emperor's mouth twitched for a long time, and he sighed. "I've made a mistake. Anyway, it was just a split soul, and one had been destroyed not long ago. It wouldn't be a big deal if another one was destroyed." The Flood Dragon Divine Emperor comforted himself. Suyu nodded and said, "If I can really find a way to resist the destruction of the world, I will help you." These words could be considered as a promise. The Flood Dragon Divine Emperor felt relieved and said, "I hope so." Looking at Suyu, the Flood Dragon Divine Emperor said, "Why have you rarely smiled since leaving the demon realm?" Even without deliberately observing, he noticed that Suyu's expression seemed to be frozen. Even when he won the gambling Saint Pathmaster and obtained the blood of the Pathmaster that many Pathmasters dreamed of, Suyu didn't show much excitement. From beginning to end, he had a calm expression, as if there was something weighing on his heart, making it difficult for him to be happy. "How can I smile?" Suyu wanted to laugh, but he could only laugh at himself. Qin Xianer had even forgotten her name, so how could he smile? On the other side of the void, the Azura world, the Shimming Pathmaster was in a good mood after finding out the whereabouts of the Azura Imperial Seal. He was packing his things and preparing to look for the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce's 7 Stars Guildmaster, Tai Wuan. Tai Wuan has some friendship with me. If he can pay the right price, I think he will be willing to return the Azura Imperial Seal to us, the Shinming Pathmaster said to himself. Noticing that there was no movement behind him, he turned his head and saw Qin Xianer in armor sitting on a flight of stairs that he couldn't see. She rested her chin on one hand, and in the other, she held a piece of grass from the ancient dream Forbidden Land that had dimmed. Chapter 2141. Why is there grass from the ancient dream Forbidden Land in my storage ring? Qin Xianer murmured in confusion. And why did it turn into a man I don't know at all after I took it out? She clutched her head in pain. Once an item from ancient dream Forbidden Land left the Forbidden Land and was exposed to the outside world, it would become the person that the owner wanted to see the most. However, Qin Xianer did not understand why the person in front of her was someone she did not know. If she remembered correctly, this person should be the person in front of the indestructible ancestral demon. She did not even know his name. Besides, who is Suyu? Why do I keep thinking of this name? She murmured. Xianming's sect master paused for a moment and said, "Xianer, I think that when you were in the ancient dream forbidden land, you encountered the ancient illusion inside. It affected your memory, and you always remember the people you met once in your heart. Qin Xianer nodded her head and said, "That makes sense. But what's with that name? No one has ever told me the name Su Yu. It can't be an ancient illusion, can it?" In response, the Xianming Pathmaster said slowly, "Xianer, don't think about some things that you can't figure out. If fate allows it, you might be able to solve your doubts." Qin Xianer thought for a moment and nodded. "I just feel uncomfortable, as if I'm missing something." If her memory had been erased by someone else, Qin Xianer would have noticed the abnormality in her memory. However, if he was erased by the heavenly Tao, he would not be able to sense it unless someone pointed it out. But the Xianming Pathmaster wanted Qin Xianer to forget Su Yu forever. How could he tell her the truth? Don't think about it anymore. This time, follow me to find Tai Wuan. After this is done, you can become the true master of the demon realm, the Xianming Pathmaster said. Qin Xianer said with a lack of interest, "All right." A few years later, Su Yu and the Flood Dragon Emperor set off from the gambling star. After nearly 8 years of travel, the eyeball of the multi-eyed boy in his hand was annihilated into a pile of ashes after emitting a strong beeping sound. This kind of situation would only appear after finding the target. However, as far as the eye could see, apart from the countless meteors and dust, where was the Western Pure Land? The Flood Dragon Emperor was also puzzled. He looked around and said, "That shouldn't be the case. The Western Pure Land should be a top-notch 6-star civilization." While he was muttering to himself, Su Yu was staring at the dust and thinking quickly. After a brief moment, a light flickered in Su Yu's palm, and a round pearl that was emitting an intense Buddhist light appeared. It was the Soundless Buddha's Pathmaster's Buddhist relic. Under the illumination of the Buddha's light, an exceptionally shocking scene appeared. Amidst the seemingly barren land, there was actually a transparent and huge hill vaguely visible. There were 68,900 caves carved on the hill. In each cave, there was a Buddha silently chanting scriptures, releasing a majestic Buddhist voice. Just hearing about it was enough to make one sink into it. Even the Flood Dragon Emperor was almost unable to extricate himself from it. Su Yu, on the other hand, released the 3,000 small worlds to avoid being trapped in it. Is this how the Western Pure Land treats its guests? Su Yu asked calmly. His voice contained 8 types of laws, and he was not afraid of the Sanskrit sound at all. Instead, he slowly suppressed the Sanskrit sound. The Buddhas in the cave stopped one after another, their eyes filled with surprise. They had relied on strange scriptures to conceal their existence. However, who would have thought that Su Yu would be able to see through their existence with a Pathmaster's Buddhist relic? Before long, a Buddha stood up, put his palms together, and said, "Amitabha, the future Buddha said that the source of chaos should not be approached. It is not us who do not wish to treat you well." The source of chaos had not been mentioned for a long time. However, it was just as he had said. Wherever Su Yu went, there would definitely be chaos. Although to a large extent, it was not caused by Su Yu. Su Yu said calmly, "If the future Buddha could really see through the future, why would I appear here? If the future Buddha could see through the future, he would have hidden in a place where Su Yu could not find him. Now that he was standing here, it was enough to show that the so-called future Buddha had only seen a part of the future." The Buddhas looked at each other. Finally, a solemn and magnificent Buddhist voice came from the dark. "Since the source of chaos has appeared, there is no way to avoid it. Please enter." Suddenly, the hill moved away, revealing a Bodhi tree, emitting the ultimate Buddha's light. On the Bodhi tree, every leaf was a strange and incomparably large world. So he was slightly stunned. One flower, one world, one leaf, one Bodhi. The whole tree was made up of many small Buddha realms. One of the leaves swayed gently, as if waving at Su Yu. Su Yu woke up the Flood Dragon Emperor and entered side by side. After entering, a huge world, no smaller than the demon realm, came into view. There were Buddhist temples everywhere, full of monks and Buddhas. Among them, A huge golden Buddha with a dignified appearance sat at the center of the world, as if it could support the heavens and the earth. However, the golden Buddha's eyes were closed, and an eternal flame was burning in front of his chest. Benefactor, as you can see, the 10,000 lamps Buddha has fallen into a deep sleep. I'm afraid I cannot light the oil lamp for you. An illusory Buddha walked over and said slowly. He seemed to be right in front of them, but at the same time, he seemed to be far away. He was the future Buddha. They were already very clear about Su Yu's intentions. Why is it silent? Su Yu asked. The future Buddha pointed to the sky, then pointed to himself and waved his hand, indicating that he could not say. It meant that he could not speak about the heavenly law. The heavenly law again, humph. Su Yu said lightly. Take me to see the 10,000 lamps Buddha. Maybe there is a way. He controlled the small world and was not controlled by the heavenly law. The creatures of the great beginning realm could not resist the heavenly law, but Su Yu might be able to solve it. Benefactor, please go back. Everything is fate. The 10,000 lamps Buddha fell silent before your arrival. It is the will of the heavens. Why go against the will of the heavens? Su Yu's expression was indifferent. His eyes were rolling with white light, penetrating heaven and earth and all things in the universe. If I have to follow the will of the heavens, then who is the one treating the 10,000 lamps Buddha? Su Yu said lightly, you claim to be detached, but in fact you just think that I can't wake the 10,000 lamps Buddha. The future Buddha stared deeply into Su Yu's white eyes and said slowly, the soul law is indeed worthy of its reputation. Since Benefactor insists, please come with me. However, there is a benefactor who is about to wake the 10,000 lamps Buddha. I hope you will watch quietly and not disturb him. Su Yu frowned slightly. The future Buddha looked down on him. If it was not for the 10,000 lamps Buddha, who had the ability to ignite the oil lamp of the mortal body, he would never have stepped into the Holy Land because of their attitude. Su Yu kept his cool and followed the future Buddha to the head of the 10,000 lamps Buddha. He saw a group of people operating an extremely magnificent formation. Chapter 2142. Sheng Yuanxin. It turned out to be Sheng Yuanxin. Ever since they parted ways on the Dark Star, they had never seen each other again. In a vast great void, they thought they would never meet again. Who knew that this day would come so suddenly? Sheng Yuanxin also noticed him and was equally shocked. However, after a short moment of shock, Sheng Yuanxin withdrew her gaze as if nothing had happened. Beside him stood a young man in green clothes with a sword on his back. He looked at Su Yu and Sheng Yuanxin and asked, do you know him? Sheng Yuanxin shook her head calmly and said, no, I just think he looks like a friend of mine. Su Yu's expression changed slightly, but he did not say anything. It seemed that Sheng Yuanxin had something to hide. The future Buddha led Su Yu and Sheng Yuanxin to a place 1,000 feet away and said, benefactors, please wait here quietly. Su Yu nodded lightly and looked at them. There were 3 of them. In addition to Sheng Yuanxin and the young man in green clothes, there was also a one-eyed middle-aged man. His aura was completely restrained. At a glance, it was like staring at an unfathomable abyss. He is an expert. Be careful. The Flood Dragon Emperor warned Su Yu through telepathy. Obviously, he found this very tricky. In a real fight, he might not be a match for him. Su Yu nodded lightly and looked at the young man in green clothes. He could not see through his cultivation, but he should be at the level of a half-step pathmaster. His body exuded a sharp sword energy, so his swordsmanship should be good. However, Su Yu noticed that this person had an aura very similar to Su Yu's. The holy mortal body. He was secretly shocked. That young man, like him, was also a holy mortal body nurtured by the will of the people. As if sensing Su Yu's gaze, the young man in green clothes frowned and looked at Su Yu coldly. Interestingly, Su Yu could sense that he was a holy mortal body, but the young man could not. The undying ancestral demon said that only the stone embryo son of heaven could kill a holy mortal body. Su Yu wondered what would happen if 2 holy mortal bodies fought each other. As this thought flashed through his mind, So you looked at the Pathmaster and diagnosed the situation of the Buddha of 10,000 lamps. The Pathmaster was holding a mass of millions of hair-like tentacles in his hand. The tentacles reached into the head of the Buddha of 10,000 lamps. Lines of information flowed back through the tentacles and floated in front of the Pathmaster. The message that was sent back was that everything was normal inside the Buddha of all lamps. The Tao Lord frowned slightly. Just as he was about to finish his investigation, one of the tentacles suddenly turned black. Moreover, the blackness was spreading to the other tentacles. In the blink of an eye, no less than 10 tentacles turned pitch black and rapidly decayed. The Tao Master's expression changed drastically. He immediately retracted his palm and all his tentacles. At the same time, he decisively cut off all the tentacles that were about to be dyed black. The poison of the heaven Tao. The Tao Master stood up abruptly, and his face was filled with a serious expression. Upon hearing this, Su Yu's pupils shrank slightly. The poison of the heavenly Tao was something that only existed in legends. To be precise, it wasn't a poison, but something the heavenly Tao used to clean up the deformed great Tao. There are thousands of great Taos in the world. There were bound to be great Taos that deviated from the original rules and exceeded expectations. Such a great Tao could not exist in the world and would usually be erased by the heavenly Tao. The way to erase it was to descend a great Tao of rebound. The great Tao of rebound attached itself to any great Tao, and it would be devoured by that great Tao and eventually be completely destroyed. This great Tao of rebound was known as the poison of the heavenly Tao, and it could poison and kill all the great Taos in the world. It was an extremely dangerous thing. Therefore, when the Tao Master's tentacles accidentally came into contact with the great Tao of rebound, they would begin to decay. The future Buddha saluted. Ba, so it was the will of the heavens. May I ask the three benefactors if there is any way to cure the poison of the heavenly Tao? The Tao Master shook his head solemnly and sighed deeply. What kind of existence is the poison of the heavenly Tao? It is not something that can be resisted by humans. Just as the future Buddha was feeling disappointed, the Tao Master spoke again. It is impossible to restrain the poison of the heavenly Tao, but there is still a way to remove the poison of the heavenly Tao from the body of the all lamps. The Tao Master looked at Su Yu and the future Buddha, but did not continue speaking. The future Buddha understood tacitly and said, Tao Master of all laws, please step into the meditation room. So this person was the Tao Master of all laws, but his name was quite unfamiliar. The Tao Master of all laws nodded lightly and followed the future Buddha out of the Buddha's body. The future Buddha looked at Su Yu, saluted, and said, Please go ahead. This was an order for them to leave. Su Yu's face was calm, and he stared at the all lamps Buddha. He murmured, Since I've come here, I must see it for myself. Regardless of what the future Buddha said, Su Yu came to the top of the Buddha's head. He squatted down and placed his palm on the top of the Buddha's head. His palm slowly permeated the 8 laws, and they moved towards the depths of the Buddha's head. Time, space, soul, life, death, destiny, reincarnation, and creation fused into an 8-colored ray of light, and he explored it layer by layer. At first, there was nothing serious. However, when he reached the deepest part, he was indeed corroded by the great path. This great path was above the myriad paths, but the myriad paths did not include the 8 great laws. Therefore, the 8 laws were not afraid of the poison of the heavenly Tao, and they continued to explore deeper. After a moment, Su Yu's eyes suddenly flickered. In the depths that the Tao Master of all laws had not explored, he found a strange object at an even deeper level. It was a round pearl that emitted a pitch-black aura. It suppressed the Buddha nature of the all lamps Buddha, making it unable to resist the invasion of the poison of the heavenly Tao. This was the reason why the all lamps Buddha had fallen into silence. That is, Su Yu closed his eyes to sense it, and his expression changed slightly. The divine pearl of the Tao corpse? How could he be unfamiliar with this object? Didn't the corpse emperor have a divine pearl of the Tao corpse? However, The divine pearl of the Tao corpse in front of him and the divine pearl of the Tao corpse of the corpse emperor could not be mentioned in the same breath. The dead energy stored in this one was probably more than 10 times that of the one in the corpse emperor's hand. However, what kind of evil object was the divine pearl of the Tao corpse? How could it enter the body of the all-lamps Buddha and not resist? After repeatedly exploring and confirming the real reason, Su Yu slowly withdrew from the exploration. Benefactor, how was the exploration? The future Buddha bowed. Su Yu looked at the Tao master of all laws and said, "Yes, it was indeed because of the poison of the heavenly Tao." The future Buddha said, "Then, please help yourselves." This was the third time he had urged Su Yu and the others to leave, as if he was afraid that they would stay. Su Yu said, "All right, farewell." He and the Flood Dragon Emperor left immediately. Are we giving up just like that? The Flood Dragon Emperor felt that Su Yu had admitted defeat too easily. Give up? Su Yu shook his head. Of course not. The situation of the All-Lamps Buddha is not as simple as it seems. Let's go and prepare something to transfer the poison of the heavenly Tao first. There are only a few ways to transfer the poison of the heavenly Tao, and the easiest way to succeed was to transplant flowers to trees. Flowers were naturally the poison of the heavenly Tao, and would refer to things that could withstand the poison of the heavenly Tao. However, the poison of the heavenly Tao was not something that ordinary things could withstand. As far as Su Yu knew, he only knew of one thing. That was the Tao Stone. The so-called Tao Stone was a stone that had been nourished by the great path of the heavens and earth. It only appeared in advanced civilizations that were 8-star civilizations and above. In places where the great path was prosperous, Tao stones would occasionally be born. However, Tao stones were very rare, and once they were discovered, they would be fought over by everyone. Whether or not they would appear in the galaxies of 6-star civilizations was completely unknown. And in this civilization, there was only one place where Tao stones could appear. That was the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. If even the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce did not have one, there was no need to consider other places. The Flood Dragon Emperor smiled. With your relationship with the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce, do you still dare to go to their territory? Don't go and never return. Su Yu said lightly, I think the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce should be afraid of me. Recalling Su Yu's heaven-defying act of slaughtering almost all the hunters in the royal hunting ground, he really felt that Su Yu was right. All right, I'll use my split soul to help you. Su Yu was slightly startled. Your divided soul? Where is it? The Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. Su Yu couldn't help but be curious. How many divided souls have you put in the great beginning realm? There were 2 in the demon realm, and the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce had both. Guess. The Flood Dragon Emperor smiled faintly. Su Yu shook his head and said, Then I'll have to trouble your divided soul. Our divided souls are independent personalities. We can only ask him if there is a Tao Stone after we meet. There's no time to lose. Let's go now. Su Yu wasn't worried that the Pathmaster of 10,000 Arts could cure the heavenly law poison in advance. He was worried that he would accidentally touch the divine pearl of Tao Corpse, causing the Buddha of 10,000 lamps to fall into eternal sleep. The headquarters of the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce, which was responsible for the galaxy of this 6-star civilization, occupied an entire 6-star civilization. It was called the 6-star Chamber of Commerce. The strong man in charge of the Chamber of Commerce was an extremely powerful Pathmaster, known as the Iron Abacus. Every Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce he was in charge of had never suffered a loss. This was because he always calculated everything meticulously and never made any mistakes. A year later, Su Yu and the Flood Dragon Emperor rushed to the 6-star Chamber of Commerce from thousands of miles away. Almost more than 50% of the local cities were used for commercial exchanges, and all kinds of goods were available. This attracted people from all the 6-star civilizations to come. Therefore, this civilization was quite prosperous. The 2 of them waited in a tea house. Not long after, a gorgeously dressed but bearded male Tao Lord walked over. This person was male, but his face was smeared with thick rouge and powder, and he wore embroidered red clothes. When he walked, he swayed left and right, swaying his thick waist like a bucket. The fairy of 9 heavens really had no fear of meat. Any kind of person could become the soul's choice to possess. Why are you looking for me? To make a long story short, I'm very busy, Humph. The person who came was one of the 4 deputy pavilion masters of the 6-star Chamber of Commerce, known as Deputy Pavilion Master Tai Hua. He rolled his eyes at the Flood Dragon Emperor and snorted softly. The Flood Dragon Emperor covered his forehead and muttered, "There's something wrong with my eyes." After muttering for a while, he said, "I'm here to ask you, has there been a Tau stone in the 6-star Chamber of Commerce?" Hearing this, Tai Hua asked, "What do you want this thing for?" Hearing the meaning in his tone, the Flood Dragon Emperor's eyes flashed. "So there is? Who has it?" Chapter 2143. Hearing this, the Flood Dragon Emperor said, "Is he a very special person? To be precise, he is a very difficult person to provoke." Tai Hua casually drew out a mouthful of red wine, touched up her makeup, and said unhurriedly, "It was the 7-star guild master. Tai Wuhan took it. Tai Abacus, who was in charge of the Chamber of Commerce in the 6-star civilization, could be called the 6-star guild master. The 7-star guild master was the president of the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce, which was in charge of a 7-star civilization area." "It's him?" The Flood Dragon Emperor looked at Su Yu with a troubled expression. "I'm afraid it will be difficult to obtain this Tau stone." Su Yu muttered, "Not even in exchange? As a member of the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce, he should prefer to trade, right?" Shaking his head, the Flood Dragon Emperor said, "You don't understand. Tai Wuhan has the title of a collector. He rarely takes a fancy to anything, but once he does, he will treat it as a collectible and never take it out again. That Tau stone might be a collectible that he has his eyes on." Su Yu frowned deeply. This was going to be a little difficult. Unless you can take out something that he likes even more. Only then will he be willing to exchange with you, the Flood Dragon Emperor said. Tai Hua wiped the corners of her mouth with a handkerchief. "That's right. So go back to where you came from. Don't think about the Tau stone for the time being." "Give up?" "No. In order to fight against the Stone Emperor, he had to light the oil lamp. He could not give up. Where is he, and how can I see him?" Su Yu asked. "He had many good things in his hands, and they might be able to move him." Tai Hua said, "He is resting in the 6-star Chamber of Commerce for the time being, but he is not someone anyone can see." "I understand. So please make an exception for me, Elder Tai Hua." So you gave her a money card with 1,000,000 Tau coins in it. Tai Hua's eyes lit up, and she accepted it with a smile. Glancing at the Flood Dragon Emperor, she said, "The person you brought is quite good, isn't he?" She stood up, twisting her waist, and said, "All right, I will help you with this." The 7-star guild master has been invited by Tai Abacus to hold a personal collection exhibition at the 6-star Chamber of Commerce. At that time, he will release a part of his treasure collection. I can arrange for you to meet him before the exhibition, but whether you can convince the 7-star emperor or not depends on your ability, Tai Hua said. Su Yu cupped his fists in gratitude. "Thank you, senior." He knew very well that this was the limit of what Tai Hua could do. What kind of person was the 7-star Chamber of Commerce's president? How could he, an elder of a 6-star Chamber of Commerce, arrange a meeting with whoever he wanted? Who knew how many connections and experiences he had to make use of in secret? It was not something that could be settled with just 1,000,000 Tau coins. He was only helping Su Yu out of respect for the Flood Dragon Divine Warrior. This gratitude was well-deserved. "It's a small matter," Tai Hua said. "Let's wait for news." Twisting his bucket-like waist, he walked away seductively step by step. At the same time, the Xianming Pathmaster and Qin Xianer had traveled for many years and arrived at the 6-star Chamber of Commerce. "Our luck is pretty good. Tai Wuhan just so happens to be holding a collection exhibition at the 6-star Chamber of Commerce. Our Azura World's Azura Sovereign Seal might be among them." Xianming's sect master said slowly, "I'll think of a way to arrange for both sides to meet. It's best to have a good talk before the exhibition." Qin Xianer didn't care and said, "All right," before she could finish her sentence. Her eyes widened as she looked at the street below the window and saw a silver-haired youth passing by. Wasn't that youth the figure that she had seen once in the ancient dream, forbidden lands? Wasn't he the figure that was always transformed by the grass of the ancient dream, forbidden lands? The Xianming Pathmaster said that it was possible that her memory had been affected by the ancient illusion in the ancient dream, forbidden lands. But now, it couldn't be an ancient illusion, could it? Sienna, what are you looking at? The Xianming Pathmaster asked as he looked down from the window. There was nothing special. Qin Xian'er felt guilty and averted her gaze. When she turned her head again, the person had disappeared without a trace. At the same time, 3 figures landed at the 6-star Chamber of Commerce. They were the master of the Myriad Arts sect. They were also preparing to go there to try their luck and find the Tao Stones. I'm familiar with a deputy pavilion master of the local Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. I'll go and find out what's going on. You guys can find a place to rest, the master of the Myriad Arts sect said slowly. The two nodded. Yuan Xin, it's rare for you to come to the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. Why don't I show you around? Maybe you'll find something useful to you, the young man in green said pleasantly. Sheng Yuanxin rejected him calmly. I appreciate your kindness, Envoy Jianmia, but I'm a little tired and want to rest. The young man in green was Jianmia. When he heard that, he said, Okay, Yuanxin, find a suitable place to stay and send me a message later. Sheng Yuanxin nodded and turned to walk into the crowd. Jianmia looked disappointed and sighed softly. Yuanxin still doesn't have any feelings for me. Maybe she's really tired. With that thought in mind, he started to look for items related to swordsmanship. Sheng Yuanxin walked aimlessly in the crowd. Her mind was occupied by the unexpected encounter with the Buddha of 10,000 lamps. Until now, she still felt that the scene was too unreal. How far away was the dark star? Many living creatures couldn't even reach it in their lifetimes. She didn't even dare to dream that she would meet Su Yu one day. In the end, she really felt that she had been dreaming. As she walked through the crowd, she suddenly caught a glimpse of 2 figures that were about to brush past her. One was a middle-aged man in a golden robe, and the other was a silver-haired young man. Her strange look attracted the attention of the silver-haired young man. He looked sideways and stopped in his tracks. The 2 of them stared at each other in a daze amidst the passing crowd. Su Yu, Sheng Yuanxin. The 2 of them called each other's names. Su Yu's state of mind, which had been clouded for many years, had a rare glimmer of light. He squeezed out a smile and said, Is it convenient to talk now? He looked around to make sure that the master of 10,000 laws and the young man in green were not nearby. Come on, let's find a place to talk. Sheng Yuanxin grabbed Su Yu's hand excitedly. Ignoring the presence of the Flood Dragon Divine Warrior, she pulled him into a nearby alley. The Flood Dragon Divine Warrior touched his nose and did not disturb them. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and leaned against a courtyard wall, looking around vigilantly. Su Yu, it's really you. Sheng Yuanxin covered her mouth with her hands and said in disbelief. Su Yu said, Do you want to pinch it to make sure it's real? Sheng Yuanxin was so excited that she could not speak coherently. She hurriedly waved her hands and said, I'm sorry, I was just too happy. How have you been since you left the Dark Star civilization? Su Yu asked. Sheng Yuanxin nodded and said, Fortunately, the Nirvana sect did not punish me because of the moon-worshipping cult. They value me very much and are ready to send me to the headquarters of the Nirvana sect to further my studies. Su Yu's eyes were thoughtful. The headquarters of the Nirvana sect must be an incredible place. Sheng Yuanxin was chosen there mainly because of her almost immortal body of 5 incarnations. Su Yu had not mastered the way of reincarnation before, so he could not understand it. But at this moment, he vaguely felt a strong breath of reincarnation from Sheng Yuanxin. Did she practice the way of reincarnation? Su Yu was extremely surprised. Or did she have some other fortuitous encounter? Oh, congratulations. She did not explain, so Su Yu naturally would not probe further. What about you? Why did you appear in the Western Pure Land? Sheng Yuanxin joked. Don't tell me you want to be a monk? Su Yu shook his head and said, I have a very important matter to ask the Buddha of all lamps for help. Sheng Yuanxin said casually, Ask him for help? Are you trying to tell me that you are actually the same as Jianmia, a holy mortal body? She was really joking and did not take it seriously. Suyu just smiled and did not explain further. They chatted idly about their respective encounters. After a while, the two of them became familiar with each other again. Have you found Qin Xiener and Xia Jingyu? As Suyu's friend for many years, Sheng Yu and Qin knew a lot about them. Suyu's face froze slightly. He nodded and then shook his head lightly. I found them, but I lost them. Sheng Yu and Qin did not quite understand what he meant. She said, I wish you good luck. Thank you. As the two of them were chatting, Jianmia stroked a jade lion in his hand and said to himself, This lion is filled with a strong breath of reincarnation, which is very beneficial for Yuan Xin's training. I believe she will like it. Thinking of this, he murmured, Yuan Xin, Yuan Xin, I have the holy body of mortal fetus. If you reject me again and again, it would really mean that you don't want to accept my kindness. I hope you will stop while you are ahead. Don't use that trick on me again and again. As he spoke, he came to the entrance of the alley according to a compass that was used to find scents. Why did you choose such a place? He looked up subconsciously and was stunned by the scene in front of him. Sheng Yuan Xin, who claimed to be tired and wanted a rest, was not resting. Instead, she was deep in the deserted alley, chatting and laughing with a man. Her words were warm and her behavior intimate. She was completely different from the Sheng Yuan Xin in his memory, who was always as calm as dust. The anger of being deceived, fooled, and kept in the dark erupted like a volcano. Sheng Yuan Xin, Jianmia growled in a low voice. Sheng Yuan Xin, who was chatting happily, heard his voice and the smile on her face froze. Looking at the furious Jianmia, her heart skipped a beat. She understood Jianmia's feelings for her very well. Sheng Yuan Xin understood his character even better. He was filled with a strong desire to dominate. Many people who had pursued her before had died a violent death or disappeared from the face of the earth. She knew who had done it. Therefore, when they met in the Western Pure Land, she pretended not to recognize Suyu because she was afraid of implicating him. However, no matter how hard she tried to avoid it, the unthinkable still happened. He is my friend. Don't think too much about it, Sheng Yuan Xin said. Jianmia's eyes were dancing with flames as he said coldly, Friend? You recognized each other back in the Western Pure Land, but you pretended not to know each other. Are you just ordinary friends? Sheng Yuan Xin, if you don't give me a clear explanation today, I won't let this matter rest. Sheng Yuan Xin sighed helplessly. Looking at the man's overbearing attitude, Suyu stepped forward and looked at him calmly. Who are you to her? Do you have the right to control her? Even if they were partners, he didn't have to restrict her like this, did he? Chapter 2144. Do you have the right to interrupt when I'm talking? Get lost. The green-clothed youth glared at Suyu furiously. Suyu's gaze became ice-cold. If it were any other woman, he wouldn't bother to get involved in such an inexplicable entanglement. However, Sheng Yuanxin was not just any other woman. She was a friend he had known for many years. Seeing that Suyu had no intention of leaving, the green-clothed youth laughed angrily. Do you really not know what gratitude is? If it was any other time or any other place, you would already be a dead man now. Would you still be standing here talking? Scram immediately. Without saying a word, Suyu walked up to Sheng Yuanxin and put his arm around her soft and slender waist. He said, Yuanxin, where did this guy come from? Sheng Yuanxin's delicate body stiffened slightly. She was stunned and didn't know what to do. She had never even dreamed that Suyu would treat her like this. It was to the extent that she herself was incoherent as she said, He's a friend. Suyu calmly looked at the green-clothed youth. Yuan Xian's friend, right? Please remember to be more observant. Don't get in the way when I'm talking about love with Yuan Xian. The cyan-clothed young man was slightly absent-minded. He stared at Sheng Yuanxin in disbelief and said in a gloomy tone, Is what he said true? Sheng Yuan wanted to refuse, but she shook her head. She did not want to implicate Suyu. However, Suyu's soul voice suddenly rang out in her soul. Don't worry about me. Sheng Yuanxin hesitated for a moment, as she recalled that Suyu never did anything that he wasn't confident in. She then leaned into his embrace and said, Envoy Jianmia, as you can see, we have long been in love with each other, and we have even promised to marry each other. am already his woman. Please don't bother me in the future, Sword Extermination Envoy. Sword Annihilation's eyes widened. His visible anger seemed to have materialized and was about to erupt. Saint, Yuan, Heart, you've been lying to me all along. Sword Annihilation flew into a rage. A sharp sword Dao nomological law rushed over in an instant. Su Yu's eyes turned cold. Is this what you mean by liking Sheng Yuanxin? She wanted to kill Sheng Yuanxin for the slightest annoyance. This was possessiveness. He only treated Sheng Yuanxin as something that belonged to him. Humph! Su Yu snorted softly, and an intense sword will flew out. Pa! One was a sword Dao law, while the other was just a sword intent that had yet to condense into a law. In theory, the former was naturally stronger and the latter was weaker. However, when the two of them came into contact, they actually destroyed each other and were equally matched. Sheng Yuanxin saw it clearly, and her eyes lit up. Su Yu's sword doctrine could be said to have reached the pinnacle of perfection, and he could contend with the sword doctrine's rules just by relying on his sword intent alone. How could she know that when the sword demon's demonic sword technique was cultivated to the extreme, it would be a powerful existence that could injure the sinful girl? No matter how strong Jian Mie's sword Dao was, could it be stronger than the sinful girl's? No way. This result was completely within his expectations. Jian Mie was also astonished. He had assumed that he would be able to kill Su Yu, and, at the very least, he would be able to leave both of them in a sorry state. Who would have thought that the other party would easily block his sword Dao? And it was with sword intent. Human, you've angered me, Sword Annihilation said. Su Yu said indifferently. To be precise, you are angry out of humiliation, aren't you? You should leave as soon as possible when I meet Sheng Yuanxin and my mood improve a little. If you are late, you may not be able to leave even if you want to. Jian Mie raised his head and laughed, showing his teeth. Is that so? All the more reason for me to try. How could he have missed the brilliant look in Sheng Yuanxin's eyes as she looked at Su Yu? Even if he only treated Sheng Yuanxin as an object, he would never want his image to be inferior to that of a wild boy of unknown origin. Clang! He pulled out the 3-foot-long green-edged sword from his back and pointed it at Su Yu from afar. Come on, I want to see where the pinnacle of your sword Dao lies. Su Yu let go of Sheng Yuanxin, unafraid. He said indifferently, As you wish. He was about to take out the royal scepter dragon sword when the Flood Dragon Emperor appeared from around the corner. He said calmly, Let's stop here. The 6-Star Chamber of Commerce's law enforcement team is here. If we don't leave now, none of us will be able to leave. What kind of place was the 6-Star Chamber of Commerce? It was a place where the wealth of the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce was gathered. How could it not be guarded? Fighting was prohibited in the city. The brief confrontation between their Sword Dao and Sword Dao had attracted the attention of the law enforcement team, who were rushing here at high speed. Jian Mie was annoyed. What a hindrance! However, he quickly sheathed his sword. They were here to seek help from the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. Wasn't causing trouble here, asking for trouble? You're lucky, but the next time we meet, I'll cut you down with my sword. Jian Mie stared at Su Yu deeply, memorizing his appearance. Then, he glared at Sheng Yuanxin angrily, snorted, and left with his hands behind his back. Su Yu glanced at him and left with Sheng Yuanxin. After finding a quiet place, Su Yu said, I've implicated you, haven't I? Would Sheng Yuanxin be able to fight Jian Mie alone when they returned? Would the Pathmaster of 10,000 laws help Jian Mie? It's okay, unless he lights up the oil lamp of the divine mortal body. At that time, I would still be wary of him. But now, be it in terms of strength or status, they are equal, Sheng Yuanxin said. Sheng Yuanxin had given Su Yu another opportunity to light up the oil lamp. Then, he had to get his hands on the Dao Stone, even if he had to snatch it. Have you considered leaving Nirvana? Su Yu asked. Sheng Yuanxin smiled bitterly. The power of Nirvana is beyond your imagination. It's not something that can be measured by civilizations. If I insist on leaving, the consequences will be unimaginable. Su Yu frowned and asked, Is there really no other way? There is, unless one day I can make a great contribution that the whole of Nirvana can't ignore. Then I might have a chance to leave. But now, I have the mark of nirvana on me, so it's useless to hide. Sheng Yuanxin spread out her palms. A great contribution that shook nirvana. Suyu remembered it in his heart. The two talked for a long time before they parted reluctantly. This is the heart of nothingness, which is unique to nirvana. No matter where you are in the great beginning realm, as long as you drip your blood into it, you can communicate briefly. Sheng Yuanxin stared at Suyu deeply and took out a heart-shaped stone. It was filled with dense power of nothingness, which was quite dangerous. This thing has its limitations. Only people who have dripped their blood together can communicate with each other, and it can only be used once. If anyone uses it once, it will be destroyed. Sheng Yuanxin sacrificed a drop of her own blood and dripped it on the stone. Suyu did the same. Crack! The heart was divided into two halves, and they each held one half. Unless it was absolutely necessary, this thing should not be used. Then goodbye. Sheng Yuanxin looked back 3 times with every step, her heart filled with reluctance. Suyu said, "We will probably meet again." Sheng Yuanxin didn't understand what he meant. She just thought Suyu was comforting her. She smiled sweetly and walked into the crowd alone. We're finally done. The Jiao Dragon King walked out from the corner and stretched lazily. Suyu turned around expressionlessly, took a breath, and said, "Let's get ready to exchange with Tai Wuhan." The two came to a place that specialized in renting secret training rooms and rented 2 of them. Suyu closed the stone door and released the 30-foot small world. In this way, no matter what Suyu took out, no one would be able to detect it. As the 7 Stars Guild leader, Tai Wuhan must have seen everything. He probably already has many things that I think are rare, right? Suyu's fingers caressed a speck of world destruction dust. He shook his head and put it back. After thinking for a long time, he took out the green stone slab and entered it. After going in and out many times, he could basically walk freely like a mortal in the Taishu Xian Palace. He came to a clump of bushes. He stared at one of the thorns that was the most luxuriant and contained the most Taichu energy. His heart moved, and he dug it up. Perhaps Tai Wuhan, as a path master, didn't care for Taichu energy. However, there weren't many living plants that contained Taichu energy in the Taichu realm at the moment. This thing could be used for a try. Then, he left the place and appeared in the 9 Jade spiritual pearl. He came to the nursery and looked at the heavenly orchid silver bamboo, which had a lifespan of nearly hundreds of thousands of years. He thought for a while and cut off one. This thing could also be used for a try. The heavenly orchid silver bamboo was an extinct divine tree in the outside world. Only a few survived in the 9 Dragons Valley. In addition, it was extremely old, far beyond the normal lifespan of the heavenly orchid silver bamboo. If he took it out, it might have unexpected effects. Speaking of the heavenly orchid silver bamboo, Suyu naturally didn't forget that he still had a fruit of the heavenly orchid silver bamboo. Now that the fruit was completely cracked, the outer shell broken into 2 large pieces and 36 small pieces. The large pieces were used to hold the incomparably heavy stone inside, while the small pieces could be taken out for a try. This thing must have some special characteristics. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to hold the incomparably heavy stone. After preparing the 3 items, Suyu waited expectantly for Deputy Cabinet Master Tai Hua's notice. While there was still time, he sat cross-legged, and a wooden sword appeared above his head. This was the lifetime's understanding of the way of the sword that Demon Sword Wuya had imparted to him. Suyu had completely comprehended the 9 strokes of the demonic sword. There was only one sword technique left, but he couldn't grasp the inspiration for it. That sword was the brilliant sword that Demon Sword Wuya had comprehended before his death. It was smooth and without substance, but it had been able to hurt the sinful woman. He vaguely remembered that Demon Sword Wuya had left the flow of time and space, bearing the suppression of billions of years of time and space, and wielded the sword. Before he died, he looked up to the sky and laughed. Knowing the way in the morning, I can die without regrets. Even the way is inferior to the ultimate technique. Suyu murmured softly, recalling the words that Yun Yazi had said to Demon Sword Wuya. He held the wooden sword in his hand and fell into deep thought. However, after a long time, he still couldn't figure it out. He took out the divine nine-dragon cauldron and looked inside the cauldron at Yun Yazi, who was sitting cross-legged amidst the endless divine blood. Since leaving the Tao Tai's cage, Yun Yazi had been nourished in the divine nine-dragon cauldron for a long time because his soul was too fragile. Decades had passed in the blink of an eye, and Yun Yazi still showed no signs of waking up. Just as he was about to look away, he suddenly noticed something strange. He fixed his eyes on it and was surprised to find that the divine blood in the cauldron was rippling, condensing into a line of small words. You lack a heart of the sword. To comprehend the supreme sword technique that rivals the Great Path, you must have a heart of the sword. Chapter 2145. I'm in an important moment of recovery, so I can't come out to meet you for the time being. Did that mean he was about to wake up? After seeing Shang Yuanxin, Su Yu's face had a smile. When the time comes, we will welcome Master out of seclusion. Su Yu put away the divine nine-dragon cauldron in anticipation, thinking about what the heart of the sword was. At that moment, the Flood Dragon Emperor knocked on the door and said, Tai Hua sent a message to meet with Tai Wuhan tonight. Su Yu was delighted and immediately opened the stone door. After putting away the 3 items, he immediately left for the headquarters of the 6-star Chamber of Commerce with the Flood Dragon Emperor. Outside the main hall of the headquarters, Tai Hua waved from afar. Come here quickly. The two of them walked over. Tai Hua looked at the Flood Dragon Emperor and said, You don't have to go. The 7-star Chamber of Commerce is very shrewd. If he sees you and me at the same time, he might notice something. The Flood Dragon Emperor said helplessly, I have no choice. It doesn't matter. So you thought for a moment, then took out a cloak and covered his whole body. Under the cloak, Su Yu released the small world but controlled it to a very small area, just enough to cover his face. Let's go. Tai Hua took Su Yu into the main hall of the headquarters. Upon entering, he found that there were already 5 people in the hall. Su Yu was not surprised to see Shang Yuanxin among them. However, when he saw the other 2, he stood there as if petrified. Xianming Pathmaster. It was him. Su Yu would never mistake him for someone else. He was the Xianming Pathmaster who had lurked in the Milky Way star sand and only appeared when he left the Tao Tai's cage. Su Yu was just surprised to see him. However, when he saw the bored young girl next to him, Su Yu was pleasantly surprised. Qin Xiener. It was Qin Xiener. Although the armor covered most of her face, he would never mistake her for someone else. It was indeed Qin Xiener. Look at me. What's the matter? Qin Xiener asked coldly, her whole body exuding a faint murderous aura. Su Yu was excited, but he managed to control himself and leaned to the side quietly. He was a wanted criminal of the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. At this moment, he could not expose his identity. Standing on the other side, he could not help but look at Qin Xiener, feeling both joy and inexplicable sadness. Now, she probably didn't even remember Su Yu, as even his name had faded from her mind. However, they were still fated to meet again in the vast great beginning realm. Qin Xiener was very unhappy. Although the cloak covered her body, she could still feel that the eyes of the other party were looking at her. Xianming, that guy is so annoying. He keeps staring at me. The Xianming Pathmaster glanced at Su Yu and said nonchalantly, I'm just looking at you. I won't do anything to you. Qin Xiener pouted. I won't let him off later. She averted her gaze, trying to pretend that she didn't care. But for some reason, she felt uncomfortable all over. It was as if that person's gaze was very special. Damn it. Qin Xiener clenched her fists. Just as she was about to verbally warn him, the air suddenly trembled, and the surroundings became inexplicably oppressive. A short, childlike man entered the hall with his hands clasped behind his back. His appearance was rather strange and made people laugh. However, no one in the hall laughed, because the cultivation that he unintentionally exuded was extremely terrifying, far stronger than that of the Flood Dragon Emperor, the Myriad Arts Pathmaster, and the Xianming Pathmaster. Without a doubt, this child was the legendary 7 Stars Guild Master, Tai Wuhan. He sat at the head of the hall with his hands clasped behind his back, looking at them condescendingly, a hint of impatience on his face. You people are always thinking about my collection. As soon as the meeting began, everyone sensed that something bad was about to happen. Tai Wuhan didn't seem to have any intention of exchanging anything. The three groups of people present must have entrusted their deputy pavilion masters, and since Tai Wuhan was here as a guest, he had no choice but to give face to everyone. The people present looked resentful, thinking that today's exchange would not end well, unless Tai Wuhan could really bring out treasures that he was extremely satisfied with. The first to speak was the Shimming Pathmaster. He said, "Elder Wuhan, do you remember me?" Tai Wuhan looked at him, thought for a moment, and said, "Who are you?" Immediately, the Shimming Pathmaster said awkwardly, "Back when you were still a 6 Stars Guild Master, I once helped you manage the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce in the Azura world." The Azura world. Tai Wuhan dragged out his words. Before the Shimming Pathmaster could smile, he said, "I don't know you." This made the Shimming Pathmaster extremely embarrassed. He had boasted to Qin Xiener that he had some friendship with Tai Wuhan. But now, Tai Wuhan didn't even remember. "Don't try to get close to me. Even if you're my grandson, you have to show me what you can bring out to satisfy my expectations if you want to take away my collection." The Shimming Pathmaster nodded repeatedly. Guildmaster is right. He took out a piece of sand. It was the Milky Way star sand. However, compared to the past, the Milky Way star sand was even more dazzling now. It looked like an incomparably long Milky Way in his palm. It seemed that after the Shimming Pathmaster took it back, he had made some modifications or refined it again, which greatly improved the Milky Way star sand. The Shimming Pathmaster introduced, this is the spring-grade Milky Way star sand. It can purify treasures below the Tao artifact level, right?" Tai Wuhan interrupted him unexpectedly. The Shimming Pathmaster was taken aback. "Yes. Does the Guildmaster have a collection?" "No," Tai Wuhan said. However, just as the Shimming Pathmaster heaved a sigh of relief, Tai Wuhan said again, "Of course I won't collect this kind of trash. I do have 10 snow-grade Milky Way star sand in my collection." The Shimming Pathmaster's face turned green and red. The item that he was so proud of was actually trash in Tai Wuhan's eyes. Next, Tai Wuhan said indifferently without looking at him. The Myriad Arts Pathmaster was a little nervous. The spring-grade Milky Way star sand was a precious treasure that could only be found by luck. If it was placed somewhere else, it would definitely be a treasure that people would fight over. However, it was completely insignificant in Tai Wuhan's eyes. The Myriad Arts Pathmaster lacked confidence and said, "I have a Myriad Arts mirror. It's a Tao artifact. Guildmaster Tai, take a look and see if you need it." He took out a rather simple and unadorned mirror. The mirror shone brightly and was filled with many different rules. Tai Wuhan's face changed slightly. The Myriad Arts mirror is the only thing that can create an artificial sacred body. It's not considered trash. The Myriad Arts Pathmaster heaved a sigh of relief. However, Tai Wuhan said again, "However, I have a mirror that I don't need anymore." The Myriad Arts Pathmaster sighed deeply. He had come too late. What a pity. 2 downward-level powerhouses had wanted to trade for something from Tai Wuhan, but they'd both returned empty-handed. It was extremely difficult to exchange for something from Tai Wuhan's hands. Next, Tai Wuhan's tone was filled with impatience. "So you thought for a moment, then took out a thorn tree that was filled with absolute beginning energy." Tai Wuhan glanced at it casually and said, "A plant that is embellished with absolute beginning energy." And wait. He suddenly felt that something was amiss and looked over. The more he looked, the more surprised he became. In the end, he couldn't help but ask curiously, "A living creature that possesses absolute beginning energy? This is something that only existed when the new era began?" When the new era began, absolute beginning energy was everywhere, and many plants naturally contained absolute beginning energy. However, as absolute beginning energy evolved into all things in the world, it would gradually disappear. Now, apart from the occasional appearance of similar things in the 9-star civilizations, it had already disappeared in other places. It's a rare good thing. Although it's not very useful, it's valuable because it's rare. Tai Wuhan's impatient look disappeared, and for the first time, he seemed to be tempted. He looked at Su Yu and asked, "What do you want from me?" Su Yu replied, "The Tao Stone." All of a sudden, The Myriad Arts Pathmaster and the other two stared at Su Yu, their faces filled with suspicion. He had actually come for the Tao Stone. The Myriad Arts Pathmaster and Jian Mie's heart sank. This was troublesome, as the Tao Stone had fallen into someone else's hands. The Tao Stone? You're overthinking it. This item is far from enough to exchange for the Tao Stone. Tai Wuhan shook his head, indicating his refusal. Only then did the Myriad Arts Pathmaster and Jian Mie heave a sigh of relief. Tai Wuhan cast a slightly regretful look at the thorn tree, then waved his hand and said, "You can all disperse." However, right at that moment, Su Yu suddenly said, "Then, I wonder if President Tai is interested in the 100,000-year-old heavenly orchid silver bamboo?" Everyone present was confused, as they had never heard of the heavenly orchid silver bamboo. However, Tai Wuhan was surprised. "You have the extinct heavenly orchid silver bamboo. Wait, 100,000-year-old? Are you sure you didn't say 10,000? The lifespan of the heavenly orchid silver bamboo doesn't exceed 100 years. So you did not say a word." He took out a giant bamboo that was 1,000,000 feet long from his space ring. The surface of the bamboo flickered with arcs of lightning, and anyone who came into contact with it would feel numb. Tai Wuhan was shocked. He stepped forward to inspect it, and was astonished. "Is it really a 100,000-year-old bamboo?" he asked in astonishment. "Where did you get it?" He stopped himself halfway through his question. This question was really inappropriate. Everyone had their own secrets, so how could he casually reveal them? After hesitating for a moment, Tai Wuhan struggled to say, Fine, I can find another piece of the Tao Stone, but there are probably only a few 100,000-year-old heavenly orchid silver bamboos in this world." As he spoke, Tai Wuhan took out a 9-colored stone that was the size of a millstone. Both of them had obtained what they needed in exchange. This scene envied the people of both sides. They had actually succeeded in exchanging for it from Tai Wuhan's hands. Tai Wuhan was very satisfied, and he laughed. "I had thought that I would be wasting my effort this time. I didn't expect that I would still gain something in the end." "Huh." He looked at Su Yu and said, "We will meet again someday. Wait, is there anything else?" Tai Wuhan asked. Su Yu said calmly, "I have another item that I would like to show to President Tai." Tai Wuhan's interest was immediately piqued, and he said, "Come, take it out and let me have a look." Everything that this mysterious cloaked man had taken out was genuine, and Tai Wuhan was very much looking forward to seeing it. So you took out a fragment of the heavenly orchid silver bamboo shell. It was the smallest of the 36 fragments, and it was only the size of a fingernail. When Tai Wuhan first saw it, he furrowed his brows. "What is this?" Chapter 2146. So you did not answer, only letting Tai Wuhan see for himself, because he did not know what it was. Tai Wuhan held the fragment in his hand and rubbed it for a while, but still could not recall what it was. After a moment of silence, he said, "May I examine it with my techniques?" If he were to examine it, he might accidentally damage the object being examined. Sure, so he did not refuse. He also wanted to know what the fragment was and what it could be used for. Having obtained Su Yu's consent, Tai Wuhan's palm rose into a field of burning flames, wrapping the fragment within it. As he did so, Tai Wuhan explained, "This is the path that I have cultivated, the great path of treasure identification. As long as something is in my domain, it will reveal its own attributes and information. Until now, I have never failed." Tai Wuhan was still speaking, but his face quickly stiffened. The fragment did not move in the flames. No information about the object appeared. Tai Wuhan was instantly embarrassed. He took out the fragment and threw the heavenly orchid silver bamboo into it. The result was accurate information. 100,300 years old heavenly orchid silver bamboo. Attribute hardness contains thunder attribute. This time, Tai Wuhan was really surprised. Holding the fragment, he examined it left and right, but still could not understand it. Are there still things in this world without attributes? Tai Wuhan was inexplicably shocked. All living things in the world had their own attributes. He had lived for most of his life, and this was the first time he had encountered something without any attributes. Or rather, this fragment was too advanced so advanced that his path was not enough to control it. All right, I want this item. What do you want to exchange it for? Tai Wuhan did not think too much, immediately saying. Suyu heaved a sigh of relief, saying, the Azura Emperor's Seal. What? The Xianming sect master and Qin Xianer were stunned. What he wanted was actually the item that they had been looking for this time. Tai Wuhan frowned. I want to exchange it for something else. I have already prepared to display this item in this exhibition, and it has already been publicized. There is no reason for me to exchange it for something else. Hearing this, Suyu frowned slightly, sighing. I only want the Azura Emperor's Seal. Since President Tai cannot part with it, I will not force it. As he spoke, he reached out to take back his fragment. Tai Wuhan struggled for a moment, then grabbed Suyu's hand. Forget it. I'll make an exception for you. Although he had no idea what the fragment was, his intuition told him that this exchange was worth it. Suyu loosened his grip and said, Thank you, Senior. Tai Wuhan took out a bone and placed it in Suyu's hand. This is the Azura Emperor's Seal? Are you sure they aren't bones fed to dogs? Suyu muttered. He couldn't be blamed for saying that. This bone was indeed too ordinary. It couldn't even be considered a magic treasure. Was this object the symbol of authority of the Azura world's overlord? Traceless Iron chuckled. Think about it yourself. After he finished speaking, he looked at the Xianming Pathmaster and Qin Xianer meaningfully and left with a faint smile. As soon as he left, the atmosphere in the hall became awkward. Xianming, don't you have the urge to beat this guy up? Qin Xianer bared her teeth. It's already irritating from the beginning. The Xianming Daelord's expression darkened as he spoke. Friend, you said that my Azura world's Worldlord seal is a dog's bone. This old man doesn't mind your words at all. There was a hint of threat in his words. At that moment, the Infinite Law Pathmaster cast a meaningful look at Suyu and said, Friend, I have something to talk to you about in private. Suyu smiled. He was mentally prepared when he received the two objects. This object might not be easy to obtain. However, he wasn't afraid. With a faint smile, he looked at the Xianming Pathmaster first. If you still want the Azura Emperor's Seal, you'd better chase away the Infinite Law Pathmaster for me. I want to talk to you in private. The Xianming Pathmaster was surprised. He rolled his eyes slightly and stared at the Infinite Law Pathmaster with a slightly warning look. Friend, don't force others to do something they don't want to do. Since he wants to talk to me, please leave for now. What do you think? He slowly released his domain, seemingly intending to make a move. The Infinite Law Pathmaster looked at the Xianming Pathmaster with slight fear. Finally, he took a deep look at Suyu and left with Jian'Nir and Sheng Yuanxin without saying a word. All right, let's talk about the Azura Emperor's Seal now. The Xianming Pathmaster stared at Suyu with a look of surprise on his face. He tried to probe Suyu's true appearance. However, under the cloak, Suyu seemed to be invisible. It was as if the person who spoke before him was from another world. Suyu said calmly, I can give the Azura Emperor's Seal to you for free. The Xianming Pathmaster was inexplicably surprised. Suyu had gone to great lengths to obtain it from Tai Wuhan. Yet, he was willing to give it to them for free? The Xianming Pathmaster found it unrealistic. Qin Xianer stared at Suyu with an unfriendly look. Humph, what are you planning? There was no free lunch in this world. The strangest thing was that they had never mentioned that they had come to Tai Wuhan for the Azura Emperor's Seal. How did the cloak man know about it? It was too suspicious. The Xianming Pathmaster found it impossible as well. Are you serious? Suyu nodded. Yes. However, I have two requests. The Xianming Pathmaster thought to himself. As expected, the Azura Emperor's Seal was not so easily taken away. He said, Tell me about it first. The first request is to be my bodyguard and protect me for a period of time. Bodyguard? The Xianming Pathmaster was able to swallow his pride and agreed immediately. No problem. The second request is for the young lady beside you to accompany me for a period of time. As soon as he finished speaking, the Xianming Pathmaster's eyes turned cold. He said in a low voice, What kind of person do you think she is? Of course, she was his wife. A wife who had forgotten about him. I think you may have misunderstood. I do not intend to do anything to her. I simply feel that she resembles an old friend of mine and want to chat with her. If you don't believe me, you could be with her anytime." Only then did the Xianming Path Master's expression gradually soften. After a long silence, he finally turned his head to look at Qin Xianer. With great difficulty, he said, "Xianer, why don't you put up with yourself for a while?" When Qin Xianer heard this, she was so angry that her nose almost became crooked. "You want me to be with a strange man? A man who has been staring at me since the beginning? My God, your eyes are about to fall out of the Azura Emperor's seal." The Xianming Path Master laughed awkwardly. "You have to lower your head when you are under someone else's roof. Xianer, for the sake of the Azura world, you have to make a sacrifice." He said it was just a chat. Qin Xianer was trembling with anger. She stared at Suyu fiercely. "Did you change the Azura Emperor seal from the beginning, just for this?" Suyu looked at Qin Xianer and was secretly amused. At first glance, she was still the spoiled little princess of the past. But compared to then, she was much more mature and wise. "Yes, why? Don't you want the Azura Emperor seal?" Suyu smiled. Qin Xianer felt that this man was extremely shameless. She said, "I don't want a—" Her mouth was covered by the Xianming Pathmaster. She said, "Yes, of course we want it. Then, shall we have a pleasant cooperation?" Suyu smiled. A pleasant cooperation? The two of them ignored Qin Xianer, who was so angry that she jumped over the wall. They reached a deal on the spot and happily sold her off. The two of them agreed to hand over a blood essence that contained the oath. They would hand it over to the other party for safekeeping until the agreed time was up. Suyu handed the Azura Emperor seal to the other party, and both of them took back their blood essence. The Xianming Path Master rubbed his palms together and looked forward to putting the blood essence back into his storage ring. He tried to persuade Qin Xianer. "Xianer, look, things have come to this. Why don't you just bear with it?" "You." Qin Xianer was so angry that her teeth were itching. She stared at Suyu fiercely and said, "Fine, you want me to accompany you, right? Sure. Come, let's go shopping." Suyu smiled. "Sure." Hearing this, Qin Xianer's eyes flashed with a hint of coldness. In the city of the Six Stars Chamber of Commerce, a man in a cloak and an armored man walked side by side. "What is your name?" "I don't know." "What do you like?" "I don't know." "Do you like me?" "I don't know." Qin Xianer blurted out. She immediately realized that she had been tricked and said angrily, "Shameless. I hate you. Are you satisfied now?" Suyu shrugged and said calmly, "How much do you hate me?" "I hope you hate me as much as the great beginning realm is," Qin Xianer said. Suyu smiled and said, "That's the end of the world." That's an adjective that many lovers like to use. Qin Xianer stomped her feet and stared at Suyu with displeasure. She said angrily, "Why are you?" Looking at Suyu, Qin Xianer was too lazy to explain. She said, "Didn't you want me to accompany you? If I want to buy something, will you buy it for me?" Why not buy something for his wife? "Of course." "Fine, you said it. Don't regret it." Qin Xianer bared her teeth and pointed at a shop that specialized in selling jewelry. She said, "I want to buy the treasure of the shop." She didn't even know what the treasure of the shop was, let alone buy it. She just wanted to spend Suyu's money on purpose to piss him off. Suyu said, "No problem, come in with me." After entering the shop, Suyu didn't ask what the treasure of the shop was. He said, "Ask your owner to come out. We have distinguished guests." Before long, the owner of the shop walked out and looked at Suyu and Qin Xianer with slight arrogance. He said, "Distinguished guests, what would you like to buy?" Qin Xianer was calm and unruffled. She looked like she was waiting to see Suyu make a fool of himself. Suyu said, "This shop of yours is worth a lot of money, right?" The owner was slightly taken aback and said with slight pride, "Yes, it's not bad. It's only 1,000,000 Tao coins." Before he could finish, Suyu said, "Fine, I'll give you 2,000,000 Tao coins. I'll buy the shop." The boss stood rooted to the ground in a daze. "Not enough. Then how about 3,000,000 Tao coins?" Suyu took out a crystal card. Chapter 2147. The owner immediately nodded and said, Okay, I'll sell it. Besides me, everything else in the shop is yours." The two of them traded on the spot. The owner handed the contract to Suyu while he took the Tao coins and left as if he had won the lottery. Suyu glanced at the shop assistants. They came back to their senses and immediately bowed respectfully. Greetings, new owner. Suyu turned his head and smiled at Qin Sienna. Miss Qin, which shop do you want? Just take it. Qin Sienna looked at Suyu in shock. She was amused and annoyed at the same time. Okay, let's continue shopping. Okay. Suyu smiled lightly. After leaving the shop, they passed by a luxuriously decorated shop. Qin Sienna said, Don't you like to buy shops? Then, how about buying this one? The shop in front of them cost at least 10 million Dao coins, right? Such a huge amount of Dao coins was not something anyone below the Pathmaster could afford. Sure, wait for me here for a while. Suyu left alone. Not long after, he returned with a pile of contracts and said, Choose whichever shop you like. I've already bought the entire street. You can have any shop you want. Qin Sienna took a deep breath and stared at Suyu in disbelief. Are you crazy? How many Dao coins would it take to buy an entire street? Where did Suyu get so many Dao coins? She could not understand it at all. She did not know that Suyu had obtained Meng Ku's space storage device. Meng Ku was a strong person from the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. The Dao coins in her hands were an astronomical figure. Buying an entire street was not even a drop in the bucket. For you, it doesn't matter if I'm crazy. Suyu smiled indifferently. Qin Sienna was stunned. Her heart rippled with a familiar feeling, like a pearl forgotten in the dust of yesterday. She looked back and found it was still there. However, as soon as this feeling arose, it was erased by a mysterious force. Ridiculous. I have never met you before, all right? Qin Sienna shook her head and said. Suyu took a deep breath and slowly took off his cloak, revealing his face. He said deeply, How could I not have met you before? It's just that you have forgotten. Qin Sienna saw his face clearly and was slightly stunned. The person in the ancient dream, Forbidden Land? Why are you here? I remember you. Xian Ming said that you could be a phantom created by the ancient dream, Forbidden Land. However, it doesn't seem that way. Suyu shook his head lightly. No, you don't remember me, and I'm not an illusion. I'm an old friend of yours. You, me? An old friend? Qin Sienna felt that it was unbelievable. This explanation was too strange, and she was unable to accept it. This was because she couldn't remember ever meeting Suyu, not even once. Sorrow welled up in Suyu's eyes as he said, That's right, an old friend that I've already forgotten. Qin Sienna shook her head. She felt that Suyu must have gone crazy. Why couldn't she remember forgetting someone? As she thought of this, Qin Sienna suddenly froze. She really did have someone she might have forgotten. After hesitating for a long time, Qin Sienna looked at Suyu and asked, Are you Suyu? Upon hearing this, Suyu's expression changed drastically. His eyes flashed with excitement, and he said in disbelief, You? How do you know Suyu? Qin Sienna said, There's always been a name called Suyu in my mind. I can't forget it or erase it. It has always existed. Could it be that you are Suyu? Suyu was extremely excited. It turned out that he had destroyed his body and sacrificed everything just for Qin Sienna to remember his name. In the end, he didn't fail. She really remembered him. I am Suyu. Suyu found that his heart, which had been silent for many years, couldn't help but tremble slightly. Qin Sienna had a knowing expression on her face as she said, I guessed it was you. An unfamiliar name that couldn't be erased from his mind. An unfamiliar figure that was transformed from the grass in the ancient dream, Forbidden Land. It shouldn't be difficult to guess that Suyu is the name of that figure. What was the relationship between you and me in the past? Qin Sienna asked curiously. The name was so deeply engraved in her heart. It shouldn't be an ordinary relationship, right? Suyu was excited. He wanted to tell her all the stories about him and Qin Sienna. However, when the words were on the tip of his tongue, he swallowed them back. The current Sienna, apart from remembering his name, had forgotten everything. It was as if nothing had happened. If you were to tell her now that he was her wife, how would she feel? Putting himself in her shoes, if a woman he didn't know suddenly pestered Suyu and said that she was his wife, would Suyu accept it? Obviously not. Friends. Suyu's heart was filled with indescribable sadness. He had never thought that one day he would reunite with Qin Sienna's friends. Qin Sienna nodded blankly. Then why don't I remember you at all? Suyu looked at her and said, because we haven't seen each other for a long time. Is that so? Qin Xianer was skeptical. Yes. She didn't notice the smile on her face. Suyu nodded with an infected expression. Qin Xianer said, all right, then I'll forgive you for staring at me rudely. However, since we were just friends, I hope you don't go too far and don't say anything rashly. Thinking of the familiar fluctuations in her heart just now, Qin Xianer felt slightly uncomfortable. I will. Suyu nodded lightly. He was already satisfied that their relationship could be fixed at the beginning. Suddenly, Suyu covered himself with the cloak again, making it impossible for others to see his face clearly. The Xianming Path Master suddenly appeared at this moment and said, young man, you have great foresight. That old guy, the Master of Myriad Laws, really doesn't want to let this go. His face was a little grave. Later, I might only be able to stall the Master of Myriad Laws, and I won't be able to get away for long. Take care of yourself. The Master of Myriad Laws was so powerful that even the Xianming Path Master was extremely fearful. Suyu said lightly, it doesn't matter. I'm not asking you to fight alone. The Xianming Path Master didn't understand what he meant. Right at this moment, the Flood Dragon Emperor also noticed the movements of the Master of Myriad Laws and the others. He immediately rushed over and said, what will come will come. This battle is probably unavoidable. Suyu said calmly, yes, let's leave the 6-star Chamber of Commerce. There are too many people here, and it's not convenient to fight. The group of people agreed and immediately stepped into the Great Void. As soon as they entered the Great Void, the Master of Myriad Laws and the other two caught up with them. The Master of Myriad Laws looked at the Azura Divine Emperor and the Flood Dragon Emperor fearfully. He stared at Suyu and said, young man, the Tao Stone doesn't mean much to you. I can give you the price you want in exchange for it. Suyu thought for a moment and said, then can I use the Tao Stone in exchange for the freedom of Sheng Yuanxin? The Master of Myriad Laws looked at Sheng Yuanxin and said, I can't consider it. I will apply to the headquarters. Chapter 2148. Everyone said that as an excuse. If he was really confident, he wouldn't have said that. Give me the Tao Stone first, and I'll apply for it from the headquarters, the Master of Myriad Laws said. Sure enough, Suyu smiled without saying anything. He said indifferently, you're a Path Master, and yet you're trying to fool me? Or do you think you can defeat me? He just wanted to confirm whether it was really difficult for Sheng Yuanxin to leave the Nirvana realm. Now it seemed that it was indeed the case. At least the Master of Myriad Laws wasn't confident at all. I'm not trying to start a fight. I'm just trying to negotiate with you calmly, the Master of Myriad Laws said slowly. Give me the Tao Stone, and I'll give you the Realm of Law. How about that? Hearing that, even the Xianming Path Master couldn't help but laugh. Sir, if the Realm of Law could be exchanged for the Tao Stone, would we still be here now? Tai Wuhan would have exchanged it for you long ago. Is this what you mean by negotiating calmly? The Master of Myriad Laws said calmly, then I'll pay you with some Tao coins. How about that? Suyu shook his head and said, what if I say I don't want to exchange? The Tao Stone was incomparably useful to him. How can mere Tao coins replace it? The Master of Myriad Laws said calmly, then I have no choice but to reason with you. His body was split into 2 halves with the space between his eyebrows as the center. Each half would be replicated with his own body as the foundation. In this way, they would become 2 identical Master of Myriad Laws. Surprisingly, although the aura of the 2 halves had weakened, the cultivation realm that they exuded was still at the level of a Path Master. This was the reason why he was so determined to defeat Suyu. The eyes of the Flood Dragon Emperor and the Xianming Path Master froze. If they fought like this, they would still be able to suppress their opponents. However, Suyu and Qin Xianer could only face Sheng Yuanxin and Jin Ye alone. I'll say it for the last time. Are you going to exchange or not? Suyu shook his head slightly and said, we've already come this far, and you're still asking whether to exchange or not. If you want to fight, let's fight. Cut the crap. The Master of Myriad Laws snorted coldly, and the 2 Path Masters launched their domains at Suyu. Humph! The Flood Dragon Emperor and the Xianming Pathmaster each intercepted a clone and said, "Your opponent is me." The four Dowlords fought each other. The entire sky was filled with domains that flew about and emitted expanses of destructive light. Any existence below the Dowlord level who got close to it would have no chance of survival. Jin Mia and Sheng Yuanxin both stared at Suyu. When they saw the Flood Dragon Divine Warrior, they had already associated the mysterious, cloaked man with many treasures with him to be Suyu. After all, the Flood Dragon Emperor was always by Suyu's side on the head of the Buddha of 10,000 lamps. The former hated Suyu very much, while the latter's eyes were filled with worry. He thought to himself, Suyu really took something that he shouldn't have. You still can't escape. Jian Mia smiled calmly, drew out the long sword at his waist, and pointed it at Suyu from afar. "Come on, let me see if you still dare to be so arrogant when we leave the 6th Star Chamber of Commerce." Suyu was not afraid at all, and calmly said, "I don't need to be arrogant in front of you." Clenching his fist, the Sovereign Dragon's sword appeared in his hand, and a sharp sword aura slowly emanated from it. When Jian Mia saw the sword, his eyes brightened, and he shook his head regretfully. "The sword is a good sword, but the owner is not a good one. It would be a waste to give this sword to you." "Fine, I'll show you the elegance of someone who has achieved great success in the way of the sword," Jian Mia said calmly. He waved the long sword, and a chain of rules moved along with the sword, twining around the body of the sword and stabbing forward together with it. Suyu was indifferent, and in a low voice he said, "A sword of ultimate ruins." The pitch-black shadow of the sword that filled the sky formed a sword dragon under the enhancement of the dragon's might, roaring as it charged forward. "What?" Jian Mia's expression changed. He had never expected Suyu to have such a powerful sword technique. "Break!" he bellowed, and the power of the way of the sword increased by 30%, destroying the oncoming mad dragon. However, his clothes were torn into strips of cloth, and his body was riddled with wounds. Jian Mia was shocked and furious. He was about to berate Suyu when he heard Suyu say, "The elegance of the way of the sword is nothing much. It doesn't match your tone at all." "Humph!" Jian Mia glanced at Sheng Yuanxin, who was curling her lips slightly, and flew into a rage out of humiliation. "That was just a warm-up. Now, I'll show you the real way of the sword." So you couldn't be bothered to listen to his nonsense. He put away the royal scepter dragon's sword and clenched his fist. 9 silver blazing suns rose from his back. 9 suns cosmos sword formation. Suyu bellowed. The sword formation, which Suyu hadn't seen in a long time, was once again being used by him after dozens of years. The 9 blazing suns instantly condensed into a sword radiance that seemed as if it could split the heavens and the earth apart. Jian Mia's expression changed drastically. He was on high alert, and he bellowed, "Everlasting sword heart." A heart in the shape of a small sword was suddenly beating in his chest. An incomparably majestic sword was released from the heart, which condensed into a thick layer of armor around his body. The 9 suns cosmos sword formation, which could totally kill a half-Dowlord, had only left a remnant mark on the armor. Suyu was shocked, and he stared at the heart with a deep look in his eyes. He had thought that the sword heart that Yun Yazi had mentioned was something that had been comprehended. He hadn't expected it to be the real heart. Only by obtaining the sword heart could one comprehend the most exquisite swordsmanship. He really hadn't expected that the sword heart was so far away, yet it was so close at hand. After a single stroke, Jian Mia retracted his sword will, and his eyes were filled with deep fear as he looked at Suyu. The other party didn't cultivate the way of the sword, but his swordsmanship was on par with his. What kind of genius in the way of the sword was this? Jian Mia was proud of his swordsmanship. How could he tolerate someone surpassing him in what he was best at? "Either you die or I die," Jian Mia growled. The sword heart in his chest suddenly flew out of his body and slashed at Suyu. Suyu wasn't angry. Instead, he was delighted. Without even looking at it, the shadow of a pendant appeared on his chest. With the Flood Dragon Emperor around, there was no need to worry about the Pathmasters instilling their way wills. The Tao Destruction Pestle was activated instantly, and the sword heart was blasted backward. Several drops of the heart's blood dripped from it. Jian Mie's mind was connected, so he was restrained. He groaned in pain and immediately retracted the sword heart. He retracted it along with the dripping heart's blood. However, all of a sudden, a space law descended and enveloped both of them. Jian Mie turned pale with fright. The sword heart was his lifeline. How could he allow anyone to snatch it away? Come back! With a loud roar, the sword heart used its own powerful sword will to forcefully break through the law and return to Jian Mie's heart. However, the 3 drops of heart's blood were snatched away by Su Yu, and they floated in his palm. Su Yu's eyes were filled with regret. The sword heart possessed spiritual qualities and only followed its host. It would only choose another master if the host died. Give me back my heart's blood. Jian Mie's face was abnormally pale. The loss of 3 drops of heart's blood was obviously a considerable loss for him. Master of the Myriad Laws, stop fighting. My sword heart is damaged. The 2 Master of the Myriad Laws who were engaged in battle retreated in unison and came before Jian Mie. His gaze swept across, and his eyes immediately darkened. He said, "If you don't want to become enemies with Nirvana, return the heart's blood, and we'll pretend this never happened." When Su Yu heard that, he merely smiled and stored the 3 drops of heart's blood into the space storage device. Was he afraid of offending anyone? He had offended the stone-birth son of heaven, so why would he be afraid of a Nirvana? You're courting death. The Master of the Myriad Law's face was surging with anger. The Xinming Path Master walked over and stood in front of Su Yu. Indifferently, he said, "Didn't we agree to discuss this? Why are you angry?" The Flood Dragon Emperor also stood with his arms crossed. He said, "Haha, you can intercept and kill us, but you can't even allow us to take something from you. How domineering." The 2 sides stood facing each other from afar. Right at that moment, suddenly, an invisible giant palm appeared in the sky above the 6 Stars Chamber of Commerce, enveloping the entire civilization. The aura of the remnants of life and death suddenly swept over. The pupils of the 6 people outside the civilization shrank. Heavenly Law, Chapter 2149. All 6 of them stopped fighting and stared at the palm of the Heavenly Tao in shock. After the palm of the Heavenly Law shrouded the entire 6-star Chamber of Commerce, it suddenly grabbed downward. A struggling human figure was revealed. Chairman Tai, the Myriad Law's Tao Lord, revealed a look of shock. Why would the Heavenly Tao attack him? Could it be that he had done something heaven-defying? Provoke the Heavenly Tao to personally suppress him? They couldn't see it clearly, but Su Yu discovered a clue. A tiny fragment emerged from President Tai's chest. That fragment was the fragment of the heavenly orchid silver bamboos fruit that Su Yu had exchanged with. It was also the non-elemental fragment. His heart thumped wildly. How could a simple fragment attract the descent of the heavenly Tao? What exactly was that fragment? Right at this moment, the palm of the heaven Tao clenched its fist and crushed Tai Wuhan into pieces. The fragment was retrieved by the palm of the heavenly Tao. From a moment the heavenly axiom appeared to the moment it left, it had left an indelible impression on them. Do you still want to continue? The Jiao Dragon Emperor revealed a look of extreme wariness. The Myriad Law Tao Master's face was filled with fear, and he took a deep look at Su Yu. He then said, "Trust me, we will meet again soon." After saying that, he left with Jian Mie and Sheng Yuanxin, who had lost their sword heart's blood. Due to the intervention of the heavenly Tao, the great battle between the 2 sides came to an end midway. There's no time to lose. Let's set off immediately. Su Yu took one last look in the direction where the heavenly law had left. He was extremely curious about the silver fruit. The heavenly Tao didn't hesitate to appear and snatch away the fruit's outer shell fragment, and even killed the owner. Then what kind of existence was the stone and the fruit? The 4 of them set off and returned to the Western Pure Land. At that time, a white dragon swam in the deep black void and slowly approached. The sinful lady sensed that Su Yu's aura was getting closer and closer. She let out a long sigh and said, "There will be a result in the end." Several years later, in the Western Pure Land, Yu and the others returned. The future Buddha sat cross-legged on the head of the Buddha of myriad lamps. He slowly opened his eyes and said with a benevolent expression, "Benefactor, what brings you here to the Western Pure Land?" Yu replied calmly, "You are not the future Buddha, so how can you know the future? Why don't you tell me what I plan to do?" The future Buddha chuckled and stepped aside without saying a word. After glancing at him, Yu came to the head of the Buddha of 10,000 lamps and said, "All of you, protect me. Don't let anyone come near me." He took out the 9-colored Tao stone, condensed the 8 great laws of nature in his palm, and slowly reached into the skull of the Buddha of myriad lamps. As the law continued to extend, it soon touched the poison of the heavenly Tao. The heavenly Tao poison was immediately attached to the 8 great nomological laws, and it flew along the nomological laws towards the owner of the nomological laws. Soon, a trace of the poison of the heavenly law, which was as dark as ink, rushed out from the top of the Buddha's skull along the rules and attacked Yu. At the critical moment, Yu placed his palm on the 9-colored Tao stone. The poison of the heavenly law entered the Tao stone in an instant, trying to penetrate it and continue to attack Yu. In the end, the 9-colored Tao stone completely withstood the poison of the heavenly Tao, and spiritual energy was deposited within it. The poison of the heavenly Tao within the Buddha of myriad lanterns flowed out along the trajectory of this poison of the heavenly Tao. In the end, not a single trace of it was left and gathered in the Tao stone. The Tao stone, which was originally of 9 colors, was now scorched black and filled with the poison of the heavenly law. The future Buddha, who was beside him, stepped forward with a pleasant expression and said, "Benefactor, you have achieved a great success. Amitabha, please come down with me to rest." However, as soon as he walked over, the Flood Dragon Emperor's eyes turned sharp, and he said, "Future Buddha, the healing is not over yet. Why are you in such a hurry? Stand aside and wait quietly." The future Buddha smiled and stepped back, but the look in his eyes changed slightly. Yu looked at the Tao stone that had absorbed enough poison of the heavenly law. He did not throw it away, but carefully put it away. This object was a rare treasure at the critical moment, so how could he just throw it away? Looking at the Buddha of myriad lamps, who showed no signs of waking up, Yu thought to himself that the divine pearl of the Tao corpse was the culprit that prevented the Buddha of myriad lamps from waking up. As for obtaining this pearl, Yu had only one way. He took out the Buddha's relic of the faceless Buddha and slowly placed it on the top of the Buddha of myriad lamp skull. Suddenly, the Buddha's relic underwent an unprecedented change. From it, a great Buddha with his back to the world was born, emitting a rich Buddha's light. The remnant soul of the faceless Buddha? Yu was a little surprised. The faceless Buddha, who had died many years ago, had left behind a Buddha's relic that contained a wisp of his soul. The Buddha helps the destined. Yu, the fact that you can come to the holy land of Western Paradise and stand in front of the Buddha of myriad lamps is your destiny. Come with me. Suddenly, Yu felt that there was nothing under his feet, and his whole body fell uncontrollably. With a bang, he landed on the ground with both feet. The first thing he saw was a spinning black pearl. It was the divine pearl of the Tao corpse. To dissolve the divine pearl of the Tao corpse, only the power of the Buddha's relic is left. However, I only have a wisp of my remnant soul left, so I can't activate the Buddha's relic. I can only rely on you. Yu nodded. That's exactly what I came here for. He held the Buddha's relic and slowly activated it with his soul strength. Waves of pure Buddhist energy gushed out from the Buddha's relic and sprayed on the divine pearl of the Tao corpse. The pitch-black divine pearl of the Tao corpse immediately dimmed. Seeing that it was effective, Yu sat with his legs crossed and persistently activated the Buddha's relic with his soul strength. During the activation process, Yu found that every time he activated it, his soul was not tired. Instead, it became stronger. He distracted himself to check his soul and was surprised to find that his soul, which had already been transformed by more than half, continued to transform. Every time, there was an additional fragment of the soul path. He was slightly delighted. He guarded his mind and continued to activate the Buddha's relic. Time passed little by little. The process was very long. After a whole year, the divine pearl of the Tao corpse had been suppressed to less than 20%. On the head of the Buddha of myriad lamps, the flood dragon emperor and the others waited patiently. Qin Sienna muttered to herself, "What's that guy doing in there? He hasn't come up for a year?" All of a sudden, the head of the Buddha of myriad lamps emitted a faint Buddha's light. Being in this place, they found that their training was like being aided by God. Many things that they couldn't understand in the past seemed clear and simple under the Buddha's light. The three of them were overjoyed. "Is this the enlightenment of the Buddha?" Shimming Pathmaster asked in surprise. He had long heard that the Buddha's light emitted by the Buddhas of the Western Pure Land could enhance the enlightenment of living beings. Now that he had seen it for himself, it was indeed true. Qin Sienna also felt that this trip was worthwhile, but after thinking about it, she said, "The Buddha's light we endured can only be considered a little bit leaked out, right? Doesn't that guy have to endure 100 times more Buddha's light than us down there?" Hearing this, the Flood Dragon Emperor looked envious. "This is the Buddha's light of the Buddha of myriad lamps. The guy's really lucky." Inside the Buddha of myriad lamps, as time passed, Su Yu's soul transformed more and more frequently. His soul grew stronger day by day. At the same time, under the illumination of the Buddha's light, his soul was unprecedentedly ethereal, as if everything was under his control and he could see through all the obstacles in the world. His heart moved, and he tried to use this opportunity to comprehend the complicated swordsmanship. However, although he could see through the swordsmanship, he was still missing something. Sword Heart. Su Yu understood. After thinking about it, he took out 3 drops of Sword Heart's blood. He pressed them between his eyebrows. Suddenly, through the Buddha's light, he vaguely saw something. He couldn't help but stand up, holding the royal scepter dragon sword in his hand, and drew a seemingly ordinary sword style forward. That sword made Su Yu feel indescribably powerful, as if there was nothing in the world that couldn't be cut open. At this moment, it wasn't when he waved the sword, but when he followed the trajectory of the sword and arrived at that mysterious and unknown realm. However, just as he was immersed in it and was about to comprehend something, suddenly, his comprehension was interrupted without warning. Looking at his body again, the 3 drops of Sword Heart's blood had disappeared without a trace. The Sword Heart's blood is too little, Su Yu thought to himself. Recalling the wonderful sword just now, Su Yu's heart was full of regret. He had only comprehended a little of that sword, and he hadn't even released the power of that style. It seemed that if there was a chance, he must get his hands on Sword Heart. Even if it didn't work out, he should at least get some more Sword Heart's blood. Keeping his composure, Su Yu continued to manipulate the Buddha's Sarira and exclaimed the divine corpse pearl. A year passed. 2 years passed. Finally, 5 years passed. The divine corpse pearl was completely purified, and all that was left was the Buddha's Sarira. That's right, it was the Buddha's Sarira. Surprise appeared in Su Yu's eyes. "Faceless Buddha, can you explain it to me?" At first, he thought that some evil creature had put the divine corpse pearl into the Buddha's body. But now, it seemed that the Buddha's Sarira belonged to the Buddha himself. The faceless Buddha heaved a long sigh. The Buddha said nirvana. If he succeeds, he will still be a Buddha. If he fails, he will become a demon. Nirvana. Su Yu's heart shook. Could it be? Just as you guessed, all the corpse clans in the world are Buddhas who failed to achieve nirvana. They don't have memories, only their present lives. Su Yu was shocked. The corpse clans were all Buddhas before? If this news was released, it would be earth-shattering, wouldn't it? Then the Buddha is... Su Yu said in surprise. The faceless Buddha said, when he passed away, he chose to achieve nirvana rebirth. However, he was disturbed by the heavenly law, which caused the heavenly law's poison to descend upon him, which caused his nirvana to fail. Fortunately, his dharma was profound. Although he failed, he didn't become a demon. Instead, he fell into a dormant state. Now, you used my Buddha's Sarira to restore the Buddha's Sarira to the Buddha. He managed to survive, but it's only temporary. He is still on the verge of passing away, and his power is very weak. He can probably only light the lamp for one person. Suyu's heart tightened. Of course, that person could only be him. However, Suyu had another question. He asked, there are more than trillions of corpses. Are there really so many Buddhas who chose to achieve nirvana in this world? The faceless Buddha smiled. Of course, there are no Buddhas in the Western Pure Land. However, there are many Buddhas in the Nirvana organization. Suyu was a bit stunned. Aren't all the Nirvana followers who devour their faith? Where do the Buddhas come from? Recently, I have been so busy. My updates are always delayed until late at night. I don't have the energy to write them. From tomorrow onwards, I will update them at the usual time.